Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. Let me get this straight. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is my show. Twitter seems to be down, like in its entirety. Yeah, that's fine. StreamYard is giving me a heads up. Also, when I was trying to go, it didn't necessarily work with mine. That's okay. No worries. We will move on without it. Thing is, I organize my show through Twitter. And so if you notice, many of the links and everything else I have are located on Twitter. So it's a bit of a pain in the ass. That's okay. I was looking for other links in order to compensate for it, but we'll just have to move on. I hope you guys are doing okay this morning. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed the Jamal Thomas Morning Show, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. We are here. If you are under the sound of this voice, you have my thanks for being under the sound of this voice, and I appreciate you for being so. We have a damn good show for you today. I think the big news, I can't show it. I was going to show in the UN Security Council vote, but I can't really show the UN Security Council vote because, God damn it, Twitter. Like, it's funny how these apps worm their way into your life. And then we don't have those apps. It's kind of hard to show that stuff. Let me see. I was trying to find the UN Security Council, basically, to long story short, without showing the actual video of the vote itself. The UN Security Council has voted to approve the quote-unquote stabilization force that it's supposed to go into effectively an occupation of Gaza. This includes the peacekeeping body that Donald Trump is effectively going to preside over, along with Tony Blair. That's assuming, I would imagine, if Blair gets the votes for it, but most likely Blair will get the votes for it, in order to oversee humanitarian aid and everything else that's going into and out of Gaza. China and Russia put out withering comments in regards to what they thought of the vote, what they thought of the bill, what they thought of the proposal, and then they voted to abstain, which effectively allowed it to go through. Now, China and Russia has a veto in the UN Security Council, and they could have said, yeah, no, we don't want this to go through, in which case it wouldn't have gone through. That is not what they did. Look, man, I would tell you, as somebody who lives in the US, where a lot of words are often used for either voting, a lot of words are often used by both political parties. Oftentimes those words don't necessarily mean anything. I can remember when Mitch McConnell gave that vigorous speech against Donald Trump after January 6th, effectively blaming Trump for everything. And then it's like, yeah, but Trump is not in office, so let's just call it a day. Words are one thing. I don't care about your words. Honestly, I've gotten to the point where I don't care. What you do is something different. And it's one thing to give a speech about these proposals, this, ceasefire, and we believe that the United States is implementing a plan that basically goes to nowhere and that doesn't necessarily go for a two-state solution. I could show you the clip, or at the very least I used to, of Netanyahu coming out effectively saying, look, we don't need permission from anybody. There will not be a two-state solution. So a plan that is supposed to have a quote-unquote two-state solution shiny object, Israel is saying this is not going to happen. And I would wager to you, the Trump administration also, this is not going to happen. And yet, you have Russia, China, and many nations still going with this fig leaf as if this is a real thing and this is something that's actually going to take place. Russia made it very clear in their statement, this is a plan to nowhere. That for all intents and purposes, for all of this talk about a two-state solution, we don't see how this is going to come into effect. There are so many caveats and open-ended points in this particular plan. This plan seems to be the opposite of what you're calling this plan. And then they abstain, allowing it to go through anyway. China, something very similar. I'm sick of the words. If you remember, China was also one of these countries that would go after Israel pretty heavy-handedly on the issue of genocide and continue to sell it all sorts of goods and services, basically the largest trading partner. Russia would do the exact same thing. Words are one thing. Words are one thing. You can write all the strongly worded letters you want. Erdogan went out there and called Benjamin Netanyahu Hitler, and then turned around and worked with that Hitler to overthrow the Syrian government. Put it in context. What do your words matter? What you do matters. If you had the force and the power to actually take a particular position, and you give a strongly worded statement, and then you take the opposite position, or let's not say the opposite position, but you abstain from the position, allowing it to go through anyway, then what is your statement matters? What are you putting in it for posterity? Well, will people look back on this in 20 years? Dude, I don't care about what people are going to look back on 20 years and see your strongly worded statement. I don't care about that at all. What I care about is that you've effectively allowed a colonization force in Gaza using rando countries to occupy the country and completely remove any notion of self-determination from the Palestinians in that place. You've effectively taken over the job of a genocidal, maniac, terrorist country, Israel, a country of squatters. That's what you've effectively done. And you've solidified it in the UN Security Council, giving it a fig leaf of legitimacy. Let's be very clear. Hamas had every right to resist under international law, occupation, and every right to resist in regards to going after military targets and everything else. They had every right to do so. And so this idea that a country that has just murdered 100,000 people, if not more, and that has been putting people in prison where the majority of the society agrees with the murders, agrees with the rapes, agrees with all of that stuff, to the tune of 60% at the very least believing Israel has the right to rape Palestinian prisoners. That's the country we're talking about. And a bill that has just gone through has solidified that into law under the UN Security Council. The two countries that had the capacity to do something about it, they're at odds, supposedly, with the United States, allow it to go through. That's just fantastic. That's just fantastic. Yeah, there's that, right? I mean, that took place. That happened today. And so everything that will fall down from that. Now, Hamas has issued a statement. I would love to be able to give you that statement. Oh, good. They're back up. Okay. All right. Hamas responded to this, pointing out that this effectively destroys all notion of Palestinian self-determination right here. And they give, let's say, guidelines that they wish this stabilization force, what I call an occupation force, to adhere to. Question: if Israel goes on a killing spree, does the occupation force intervene in order to stop the killing spree? Yea or nay? Yea or nay? Right? It's one thing if you tell me, well, this stabilization force is there to also prevent Israel from murdering Palestinians. Do we believe that? Do we really believe that? Hamas released a press statement right here. The Islamic resistance movement, Hamas, affirms the following: this resolution does not meet the level of our Palestinian people's political and humanitarian demands and rights, particularly in Gaza Strip, which for 2 years endured a brutal genocidal war and unprecedented crimes committed by the terrorist occupation in front of the entire world, the effects and repercussions of which remain ongoing despite declarations of the war's end, according to President Donald Trump's plan. The resolution imposes an international guardianship mechanism on Gaza Strip, which our people and their factions reject. It also imposes a mechanism to achieve the occupation's objective, which it failed to accomplish through the brutal genocide. Furthermore, this resolution detaches the Gaza Strip from the rest of the Palestinian geography and attempts to impose new realities away from our people's principles and legitimate national rights, thereby depriving our people of their right to self-determination and establishment of their Palestinian state, with Jerusalem as its capital. I hear my guest here, so I'm going to go to my guest. But long story short, sad day. Sad day. What's going on, Carl? How you doing, man? You doing okay today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Jamar?
I am doing fine. I am doing well. Better that you are with me. Carl Jha, he's host of Silk and Steel podcast, focused on China and surrounding regions and their history, culture, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Jha. You can follow his podcast at Steel Silk, letter N. You can subscribe and support their podcast on patreon.com/Silk and Steel. Carl has a fantastic podcast. Every time you come on, Carl, I say it. The 5,000 years of Chinese history is just mind-blowing to me. No, man, you do great work, and so I appreciate you joining me.
Thank you.
I was watching this kerfuffle. I call it a kerfuffle that took place between China and Japan. Japan apparently comes out and says something to the effect of that they would intervene if China goes for reunification of Taiwan, and they would like militarily intervene. Now, when this was positioned to Trump, effectively saying, hey, Trump, this is what the Japanese prime minister has just said. Trump gave a weird statement where he said something to the effect of, a lot of our allies are not friends either. Apparently aiming that at Japan, which is wild to me, right? Because the Japanese foreign minister was jumping around on stage with Donald Trump, like, this is my great friend, this is my great buddy, our alliances, et cetera, et cetera. And Trump, because Laura Ingraham, he was on the Laura Ingraham interview, and Laura Ingraham asked him something about, well, hey, is it China? Like, China's not a friend of ours, right? And she was talking in the context of Japanese prime minister. And he was like, a lot of our allies are not our friends either. And says, basically, a lot of these countries have taken advantage of us more than China. What did Japan expect from this? Obviously, this is a sore spot.
So first of all, what the Japanese prime minister has done is quite similar to what happened a few weeks back at EU. When I talk about EU Parliament, a portion of EU Parliament, this group of parliamentarians, so-called IPAC, the Inter-Parliamentarian Alliance on China, which is co-sponsored by none other than Marco Rubio, invited quote-unquote vice president of Taiwan to speak in the Brussels. I mean, at that time I said they're stepping on the reddest of red line on China. Now but in EU's case, they can still claim plausible deniability. They could claim, oh, it's just some crazy, we have all kind of politicians in our parliament. It's just some of our parliament have this idea, but it does not represent the all of EU. They can still say something like that. But for Japan, this is very unambiguous. This is spoken by Japanese prime minister, who just recently took office, by the way. And you can't say there's no plausible deniability about this. This is very clear. She said, if China is going to, send its warship into the Taiwan Strait, that is an existential issue for Japan that will necessitate our military involvement. Now, this is very triggering for China. So first of all, when it comes to Taiwan, for China and Chinese people, this is a very emotional issue. I mean, to make an analogy, like this is Ukraine is an emotional issue for Russia and many Russian people. In very similar vein, Taiwan is very emotional issue for the Chinese people. And if you just add Japan to that mix, that's a tinderbox, because the whole reason, there's a separation status between Taiwan and China. The first time that happened was under Japanese occupation when, after the first Sino-Japanese War of 1894, 1895, China was forced to give up Taiwan to the Empire of Japan, and then Taiwan became a Japanese colony for 50 years. After World War II, Japan was forced to give Taiwan back to China. So given that history, and now a Japanese prime minister saying that, they're going to send the Japanese military to Taiwan Strait. That okay? If the war like there's a famous Taiwan influencer called Jim Boss. He commented on this. He said, "Well, if there the possibility of war is around like 0.2%, when you add in Japan, suddenly the possibility became like 8,500%." and when the and there's this whole idea of that this the existential issue for Japan is obviously bogus, because Japan, she had to say that to justify getting around Japan's peace constitution. Article 9 of Japan's peace constitution says Japan should not maintain a military and should only maintain a self-defense force that defends Japan. But ever since like the US, when US start realizing that it alone cannot contain China, it had encouraged right-wing Japanese politicians to essentially scrap that peace constitution. That this got a major push under Shinzo Abe. This is why Shinzo Abe is a big favorite of many right-wing in America or in the West, because Shinzo Abe gave a big push to justify, if our allies involved in wars around Japan, then we, as our allies, we're obligated to send aid. But it's still that he didn't say. He's talking about like a support role, maybe Japan for the U.S. military, but he did not say like we are gonna straight up send Japanese military into Taiwan. So first of all, China considered Taiwan part of China, so this is an internal matter for China. And for Japan, given all that bad history and bad blood, dating to World War II, and come out and say we are going to militarily intervene in Taiwan against China. By saying that, by militarily intervene if such scenario arise, Japan will make it an existential issue for Japan, because like I say, China, because it's an emotional issue for China, you cannot expect China to stay rational when it comes to the issue of Taiwan. China can stay rational on many, many issues, but when you cross that red line on Japan, you're on the path toward war with China.
Yeah,
that's 100% guaranteed. China has said many, many times over and again, right, that Taiwan independence or any push for Taiwan independence is a red line. We're going to go to war. And if Japan or US decide to intervene militarily, that's World War III. It's gonna be on. I mean, like, and no matter, people will say, "Oh, what about the cost? Would Japan, China trade Beijing for Taipei or for Tokyo?" Look, you need to understand, this is an emotional issue. When it's an emotional issue, all that calculus, rationality, throw out the window. It's gonna be war. Okay, it's gonna be war. Nukes will be flying. So people should just calm the fuck down and say, why do we need to escalate to that scenario, right? I mean, like, Taiwan is none of your business, and especially for Japan with their own colonial baggage, it's like you should stay the F out. And U.S. has pursued the so-called strategic ambiguity toward Taiwan for a long time, which means they will neither confirm nor deny that U.S. will come to the aid of Taiwan in the case of war. They have been very carefully maintained that strategic ambiguity until very recently, until like when Joe Biden was asked, would U.S. defend Taiwan? And Joe Biden says, yes, we would defend Taiwan. But even in that case, there is still a plausible deniability because it's freaking Biden. Now, nobody takes what Biden says seriously. And so, the White House did come out and slow walk back Biden's statement afterwards. But this is a very non-senile Japanese prime minister speaking about this. There's no plausible deniability about this. Yeah. And they are breaking the strategic ambiguity that even U.S. is very careful to tread. I mean, that from that, you can kind of see why Trump will make a statement like, "Not all our allies are our
Trump was like,
friends."
"Hey man, not all these people are our buddies." That statement is hilarious because Laura Ingraham seemed to be shocked by it, right? Laura Ingraham was like, "Well, China's not our friend, right?" It was like, "Hey, not all our allies are our friends either." And you're like, "What? Who?" And just to be very clear on this, to back your point up, Chinese ambassador to Japan, what is this? Wu Jinghao, I believe, posted on X in both Japanese and Chinese, saying Taiwan is a separate part of China and how they resolve Taiwan question is a matter for the Chinese people themselves to decide. Quote, "The idea that Taiwan contingency is a contingency for Japan attempts to drag Japan onto a chariot to divide China, which will ultimately lead Japan to a wrong path of no return," unquote.
People need to understand something. When it comes to the issue of Japan, the Chinese government is a pacifist compared to the most of the Chinese population. Okay, because
Really?
like most of the Chinese population want to resettle the score of the first and the second Sino-Japanese War. You know, like they still have that memory. We Chinese people have a long memory, man. This is what Japan is afraid of. Japan is constantly, especially the right-wing Japanese politicians, they're constantly scared that China will do to them what their grandpa did in China back in World War II. This is what this is about. And at some level, you know what? A lot of Chinese population would like to see that happen. And if you freaking intervene in Japan, in Taiwan, that is a cause for war. And this is, there are many reasons why the Japanese Prime Minister said what she said, because like I said, the Japanese right-wing politician. Okay, when I say when we're talking about Japanese politicians post-war, we're really talking about who is more right-wing. You know, they're mostly all right-wing, but right now they have been going further and further to the right. You know, this started with Shinzo, even before Shinzo Abe, but Shinzo Abe was really pushing the envelope, trying to kind of make the Article 9 of the Peace Constitution obsolete. And now the new Prime Minister is basically saying, yeah, we're going to send our warship, our military outside of Japan because we think that could be an existential issue for us, which is completely bogus. I mean, how is she's talking about maybe a Chinese naval blockade of Taiwan would be an existential issue from Japan, which is bogus.
Yeah,
you know,
nonsense.
Japan is not getting its energy from Taiwan. You know, it's like this is not an existential issue for Japan at all. But I think I think there's two possibilities that could be going on. One possibility is there is a collusion between the right-wing Japanese politicians who want to get rid of the peace constitution, because they want to, quote unquote, be a normal country so they can have a full-fledged military again. And then the push from Washington, who wanted their ally Japan and South Korea to take on more of a burden to come from China. Because we mentioned on your show many times, the U.S. Navy have a serious problem of lagging behind the shipbuilding capability. China has 200 times the shipbuilding capability than U.S. So right now, the U.S. Navy is already trying to offshore some of the work of retrofitting warship in Korea and Japan. And they also, because they do realize if they want to fight China in China's neighborhood, they have to cross a tyranny of distance of the entire Pacific. So they must make sure Japan and South Korea will stay involved. So U.S. can use their bases, in Okinawa, in Japan, to get inside a fight over the Taiwan scenario. But it's very interesting because United States, even up to this point, is still very careful. They kind of skirt around the red line, but they try not to overstep it. But then you have all these U.S. vassals, like you saw what happened with the EU parliamentarian, and now with the Japanese prime minister, that's kind of openly flaunting China's red line. I think it served a couple purposes. One purpose, of course, to bind those vassal states of the United States even tighter onto the U.S. war wagon, and sabotage their own relationship with China. Two, This so does United States doesn't have to come out and straight and say it, and because this is, this are our allies. Trump can always disavow this action of their allies, right? And you're like, oh, they're not really our friends.
It's like, that chick's crazy. Yeah, I don't have anything to do with that. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild. They have to know that's a red line. They have to know the history associated with it. I mean, I guess I compare it to, let's say, the history in the United States, for example, among like slavery, civil rights, those type of things, and how some of those things are hot button issues, like even today, like you're talking about like 60, 70 years on. And so you can imagine, or even Germany, right? Germany seems to want to settle the score for getting their ass kicked in the last World War. Like, meaning this stuff lingers. It doesn't just go away when the wars stop, per se. No, it's wild. That comment is just kind of outlandish. Of course, Taiwanese DPP endorses, how do you pronounce her name? Takachi's statement. China has urged them to retract that statement. I don't necessarily know if Japan is going to retract the statement or not. But either way, that's a bad look for Japan, especially given the history between Japan and China. Very bad.
I think Japan, because Japan itself is also facing a lot of issues, economic issues. Part of it is because, Japan has a lot of competitive edge of Japan got neutered by the United States since the 1980s Plaza Accord. And, U.S. actually back then took a sledgehammer to the Japanese semiconductor industry, which back then were world leading. And so now Japan's economy is not doing well. Its population is shrinking. So the politicians might thought, okay, well, we can always try war. We can always try to boost our military industrial complex, right? To shore up our flagging economy, the way that Hitler did, before World War II. Let's just inject all the money into the military industrial complex to produce weapons. That will provide more employment. Of course, that will only be temporary. It's not sustainable, unless you go to war. So I mean, that's the path they're on right now, because they can't just deal with the fact that now there's a rising China next door, which for the last couple hundred years, Japan has kind of looked down upon, as like this old decadent East that they have left behind to embrace the Western model, right? I mean, that Japan that literally had a slogan called "Leaving Asia, Joining Europe," right?
Really?
For them, it's
Did
like,
they?
yes. Yeah, it's like joining civilization, right? Joining the civilization of the West, and by abandoning like the old linkage with old Asia, which is represented foremost by China. So right now they are not happy with the whole balance shift toward China, and so they're going down with that ship. They're gonna they're gonna go try to die on the hill of the whole Japan superiority, but we're gonna have to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I assume that they thought the United States would back them up on this. That the U.S. would be like, "Hey, we're going to back Taiwan, or we're going to back Japan." Meaning, I get the sense that they're getting this kind of signal, even implicit or explicit, from the U.S. And the U.S. at the very least, Trump was like, "Yeah, dude, no, we've just had a trade war. We're not trying to escalate. We're calling this a day for the time being," and left her out hanging. So
there could be another reason, is because they also saw which wind the wind is blowing. They saw the Pentagon paper leak, whereas U.S. says we're going to deprioritize containing China. We're gonna pivot to Latin America to lay the kibosh on Venezuela, and then Japan will be like, whoa, wait a minute, what about us? You can't leave us hanging here.
Interesting.
Like we, you don't forget about us, right? So because for ironically for the Japanese right wing, they made like Japan-US security pact like the cornerstone of their policy. That
Yeah.
like they so for US to kind of leave the Western Pacific, that will be like, oh, we're gonna be left alone to face the wrath of China. No, 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 no. We can have to make a scene to make sure you stay involved, right? And this will further validate why Trump said what Trump said. It's like, dude, man, that bitch is crazy, right?
Yeah. That's interesting. That puts you, it's like Europe, for example, where Europe is like, hey man, we'll take the 15% tariffs. We'll buy $700 billion of energy. We'll buy $700 billion of weapons. Don't leave us, daddy. Like, meaning doing everything in their power to keep the United States involved in Europe and in NATO. And it sounds like you're saying Japan is doing something very similar of like, hey, we're going to make a scene to try to keep the United States involved in Asia. We don't like this idea of you pivoting away from Asia. We want you to stay here. You're a cornerstone of our defense. That's interesting. I guess I never thought of it in those terms, but I guess you may not be wrong on that. I mean, that could be why. And to be honest, it could be both, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was only a few months ago where Hegseth was like, hey, are you guys willing to die for the dignity of America? And Australia and some of the other countries are like,
yeah.
Can you reframe that? Can you say that in a different way? Yeah, so maybe it could be a few of those things, right? But where she believes that her relationship with the U.S. is closer than what it is, not realizing we could take or leave any of these people. Like, it's not, it just wasn't our interest.
They have to realize they're not Israel. Okay, they're not Israelis, so everybody have to take a back seat. I'm sorry, Israelis they're the golden boy, right? They will always take priority over all of you. Like, so, Japanese, Taiwan, you guys are just peons. You're like pawns. Israelis, okay, that they need to be protected because they're golden child.
Explain to me China's vote or this in the UN Security Council. I am always baffled by China and Russia policy regarding Israel. It's not that I have an expectation that these guys are going to go to war. I don't expect that. But both China and Russia gives a statement effectively saying, this deal sucks. Like, they didn't need all the words, right? They could have just said, this sucks. But they added more words to it. They effectively, Russia was making a point of saying, this is not going to accomplish what they said it's going to accomplish. We believe it's going to be the opposite. There's no pathway for a two-state solution, especially given the comments by Israel effectively saying this is off the table. China gives somewhat of a similar statement, effectively saying this still sucks. This is not going to accomplish what they're saying it is. Both countries abstain. And they use this idea that the Arab nations that are vassals of the U.S., that both Russia and China know are vassals of the U.S., agree with the deal. Okay, why abstain from this if they know that this deal, quote unquote, sucks?
Well, look, I mean, the China and Russia, they cannot be more pro-Palestinian than the Arabs. Okay, and right now, all the Arab nations are, especially the Gulf Arab countries, they're all going willy-nilly. Like. So for China and Russia, there's only so much they can do, especially when they're all involved in their own stuff. Like for Russia, this is a very existential struggle in Ukraine, and for China, they are still confronting the trade war and possible tensions over Taiwan. Those are their strategic priorities, and for there's a lot of expectation among many global South countries that China and Russia should take the lead, but at some point those Arab countries need to stand up and really do what they said they would do. It's
they're vassals. They're like Japan, right? Like, we're just talking about Japan and their policy and how they've we're this decadent East. We're moving to the West. Okay, well, they're all of the military bases that are in Japan and everything else. Does Japan have an independent foreign policy? No. Does Europe have an independent foreign policy? No. Do these Arab Gulf states have an independent foreign policy? No.
Yeah, but if China and Russia were, say, to exercise veto, right? Guess what would happen? They will be blamed for obstructing the peace process. The whole narrative machine of the Western control media will say, oh, it's because in China and Russia, that's why people are
It all
dying in
failed.
Gaza.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're the one they're doing the grandstanding, for their own, anti-West stands to make the Arabs, to make the Palestinian die for it. That's how they will spin it. I mean, I guarantee you. But yeah, so I mean, the deal sucks, obviously. But right now, what you can't the thing is, you can't always expect China and Russia to fight your battles.
Totally agree. And I've been in arguments with people who are, let's say, more in the Middle Eastern camp, because there's this belief that, as you pointed out, they should be more aggressive on this. They should be leaders in this front. And obviously, that is never going to be the case. Countries are realists, and they're going to look out for their own self-interest. And I don't have an expectation beyond the point of them looking out for their own self-interest. Is there a more cynical reason, too? This idea that this deal is going to go bad, and they know it's going to go bad.
Well, I mean, they pretty much said as much, and also
They did.
People say, why don't China and Russia confront Israel? Israel is not really Israel. Israel and United States is the same animal, right? We're really talking about why is China and Russia not confronting United States. But U.S. unfortunately still pack a lot of punch. Still have a lot of military power, financial power, and right now the U.S. Russia and China are still concentrating in their own neighborhood. They're not at the point where they want to challenge United States globally. I don't think we're there yet.
I get the sense that the challenge, I was having this conversation with a friend of mine, and I was pointing out to her that the main fight that's taking place, it's not really over the issue of, it's not going to be on, let's say, Gaza. It's not going to be on some of the other ancillary issues. It's going to be in the sphere to which they're engaging the U.S. So for Russia, it's going to be in Ukraine. For China, it's going to be on tariffs, providing we don't necessarily go to a larger war. And it's going to be this kind of destruction of the Western hegemony under those models, leading to this kind of new world that these guys are focused on, not on the specific individual issue of let's say, one particular country. Because, people have this idea of BRICS. Like, BRICS is supposed to get involved in these international issues. And I don't really have that point of view. My point of view is all of these countries are realist countries with different governments and everything else. They're going to work in their interests. Give me your take on that. Have you noticed that many of the countries, or many people, especially in the global South, have this idea that BRICS is supposed to be more aggressive than what it has been?
Well, I have said many times, China's goal is never to destroy United States or even to dislodge United States as the global hegemon. China just want U.S. to be a normal country. And that China can continue to do business with. But unfortunately, that's not what U.S. has in mind, because U.S. has a zero-sum mentality. I think both China and U.S. both China and Russia would deal with U.S. as equals. Would prefer to deal with U.S. as normal countries, but U.S. is not thinking of itself as a normal country, thinking of itself as a global hegemon. It must be getting into everybody's business. So the BRICS is not it's only in the kind of the zero-sum mentality of the Washington elite that BRICS is somehow anti-U.S. alliance or anti-Western alliance. The BRICS is really about asserting the country's own priorities and own sovereignty in the face of a imperial Western hegemony. But they're not seeking to, say, destroy the United States, right? That's
Right.
not the intention of the BRICS. But when you come to the issue with kind of the relationship between U.S. and Israel, we have to be real. As long as the U.S. exists, it will continue to support Israel.
Right.
Israel itself actually would not be able to exist for long if U.S. does not exist.
Right there.
So I mean, this is why I say they're basically the same animal. They're
Yeah.
not two distinct entities here. If U.S. dies, Israel would not be able to exist.
Yeah. Agreed.
And yeah, I mean, like, even though it's not true vice versa, you know, U.S. can perfectly live on without Israel, but the U.S. elite has been so captured that there's no way they will abandon Israel. I mean, I don't see a path for that, even in the immediate future. I just don't see how U.S. will ever give up on Israel. That means, you know, they're the same animal. If you want to, you know, on the Israel issue, you are really about confronting the U.S.
Agreed. No, I agree with you. Totally agree. They're our aircraft carrier in the Middle East for all intents and purposes. People always have this idea of the dog with the tail wagging the dog. I don't think it's the tail wagging the dog. Whatever Israel does is U.S. policy. There may be gradations. There may be differences, kind of, sort of. But for all intents and purposes, we're going to back our aircraft carrier. When we have a dirty job to do, they're going to do it for us. So no, I agree with you. It's not, you're not dealing with the individual nation in this case. So no, agreed. Another issue I wanted to hit. So apparently China was in talks with the new Syrian government. And I didn't quite understand what was going on with this. Some of the reports were saying that some of the fighters from Xinjiang province, some of the terrorists in that region, were going to be sent back to China. And China was seemingly forging a relationship with the new Syrian government. What's going on with this? I have to be very honest with you. I didn't know anything about the relationship between these two countries.
Right. Well, things have really took a turn. I mean, like the guy who is former head, quote unquote, former head of Al Qaeda in Syria, Giuliani, you know, he was in Washington, being, you know, in the White House, and he was getting Fox News exclusive interview. But he also traveled to, Moscow. He met Putin, right? So every other world leader have met him now, like except China. You know, what's China gonna do? But I don't think they will ever work out a deal where Syria is gonna send back the Uyghur fighters, because there are just too many of them. You know, they're the estimate ranging from 5,000 to like 20,000. You know, if you including their families.
That many.
And I think only thing that could, I mean, maybe what Giuliani could offer China is the same deal that Taliban offered to China, which is, okay, we'll make sure these guys stay here and they don't go back to China to cause trouble, right? This is basically the Taliban deal with China, that we'll keep this Uyghur fighters in Afghanistan so they don't go back to Xinjiang to cause trouble for you, and we will limit whatever anti-Chinese activity they will do from Afghanistan. And I think if Giuliani is seeking recognition from China, that might be some of the deal that he might offer to China. And right now we're still at kind of the two sides are still meeting in the bargaining phase, basically. It's too early to tell, but I think that's Giuliani might go for the Afghan Taliban approach. To say, hey, we see you guys are cool with the Taliban now in Afghanistan. You are having a trade relationship with Afghanistan. We could do the same. We'll just I know you guys don't want these Uyghur fighters to cause trouble for you. We'll make sure they stay where they are, stay put. We'll keep an eye on them, make sure they don't cause trouble for you. That might be the deal they're offering China right now. This is my guess.
Interesting. Because, it's like, we'll keep these lunatics here. Because, at one point, after Syria fell, they were like, now we're going to go back to China. And it's like, whoa, whoa. No, you may be right about that. Like, either we're sending these guys back to be in prison, or we're going to keep these guys here so they don't cause trouble. One or the other may work in the context of some kind of negotiation between the two sides. Okay, that makes sense.
Well, one is easier to do. One is definitely much easier to do than the other, because if they try to extradite, 5,000 fighters, they're gonna have a civil war, right? They're gonna have a fight. So they'll probably, more realistic approach I can see is kind of the Taliban solution. Now, whether China is gonna take that deal, whether that there's gonna be offer recognition, that's still on the table. Well, that's still way to be seen. I think right now the two sides are approaching this to see, if there's any agreement can be had.
Well, okay.
But either way, for China, there's less at stake. For Russia, because Russia, they like to maintain their naval presence bases on the Mediterranean. They like to maintain their ports in Syria. So that's their top priority, to keep the Russian port in Syria. To do that, they have to work out some deal with existing power that be in Damascus. In China, China doesn't have a port in Syria. I mean, China doesn't have too much presence in Syria, in fact. So, only thing China can offer is some kind of investment or some kind of recognition. So there's much less at stake for China to offer that recognition. So we'll kind of have to see. We're like the Giuliani have to put up some really juicy offer here to get what he wants from China.
To entice. See, I thought that Giuliani might want to get rid of, like, basically, one of my guests who covered Syria, she pointed out that ISIS has a employment drive, I call it that, and that a lot of the people who are there don't necessarily like Giuliani's relationship with Israel, don't like Giuliani's relationship with the U.S. I mean, for God's sake, the guy goes to America, right? He's going to America. You can see it. And that he may want to get rid of these people out of the country just for his own sake. Like, all right, I need these lunatics out of the country now. How can I get rid of these guys? Oh, China, hey, would you like some of these fighters back? That type of thing. But no, what you're saying makes sense, though. It could very well just be keep them there. No, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. Explain something to me. Taiwan has to know that their politics is better served with China. I mean, they have all sorts of diplomatic, let's say, economic ties with the mainland. How on earth do they continuously elect people who are, let's say, antagonistic to China and more closely related to the United States? That's so
you're assuming Taiwan is a monolithic bloc, right? But it's not. Taiwan has as many political factions as there are in United States. Actually, even more. I mean, U.S. just have a uniparty. Taiwan actually do have political parties that differ significantly, especially when you come to the cross-strait relationship, right? Especially the new president for the KMT on Taiwan, she said we should work for a peaceful relationship with mainland China. There's no reason to have an antagonistic, hostile relationship. Right. But the current government, the current ruling party that's in control right now, let's remember the last election they won 40% of the vote. The current quote unquote president of Taiwan, Lai Ching-te, he won 40% of the vote, which means 60% of the people voted against him. But the only problem, he became the president because the opposition vote was split between two opposition parties. So it was like 40, 30, 30, right? So that's how he won the presidency. And currently there's a lot of disillusionment sitting in Taiwan with DPP, particularly their economic policy, which is let's face it, Taiwan's main economic pillar is TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductors, and
Right.
the U.S. government policy has been, we'll take the TSMC to Arizona. So in case we lose Taiwan, it doesn't matter. We will have TSMC in Arizona, right? That's Taiwan's crown jewel, and that doesn't help Taiwan. This is essentially they're hollowing out Taiwan's crown jewel and taking it to America. And the U.S. even go as far as say in case of war, they will bomb TSMC, so China will get nothing. And so, yeah, so
That's God, that's wow. We would blow it up if we need. That would be a new Nord Stream, right?
So there's a lot of discontent currently with the ruling part, but you never heard about that. You never hear that from the English language press. Recently there was like hundreds of thousands of people protesting against the existing government in Taiwan. Again, almost zero coverage in the English mainstream media, because you won't fit the narrative like, oh, Taiwan is supposed to be this plucky democracy standing up to the authoritarian mainland China. Well, what do you mean the Taiwan government is prosecuting opposition leaders? What do you mean they're jailing the opposition party leaders? What do you mean the opposition is organizing hundreds of thousands of people to come to the street to protest the Taiwan government? That would be too confusing to the English language audience, right? So that's why they just chose not to cover that at all. I actually recently interviewed a couple of commentators from Taiwan to talk about this. What they think is a political ground shift in Taiwan. More people are now gradually coming to terms with rising China, and the idea is, Taiwan has hitched its boat with United States, the global hegemon, for the last 40 years. Well, if the U.S. is going down, there is no sense to go down with a ship. Why not to just hook up with your cousins across the strait on mainland China? You can still hitching on the ride of a rising global power. Then you're still good. You're still good. Life can still be good. So there's already a lot of people in Taiwan. They are they're realist, right? They're very pragmatic. So when the push comes to a shove, they will know what to do. So I'm not worried about Taiwan. I don't think there's realistic scenario of a war breaking out imminently over Taiwan Strait. But if Japan is going to send its military, then all bets are off. All bets are off. But right now, I think we're still good.
Are the two political parties that are, let's say, pro-China or at the very least pro-Taiwan, are
they're not? Yeah,
what does it say pro-Taiwan? Really. Well,
I mean, all the political party claim they're pro-Taiwan, but there's the ruling party. Their party platform is actually Taiwan independence. It's written in their party platform, and for them, the way to antagonize China is a way, actually, for them for the longest time, it was a way to get vote. Because what happened during Hong Kong protest 2019 is they really crank up the media campaign in Taiwan, say, look at what happened in Hong Kong. This is what happened if China takes over, right? This is why you got to vote for us, because we will stand up for Taiwan. Right. That's how they scare people to vote for them. But that tactic has been working for a long time, but until it no longer works, because eventually people realize, China is not coming over anytime soon to take over militarily, but you're not doing anything to improve our livelihood. You're not making our economy better. We're not looking toward a better job prospect. We're not, our children are not, hopeful for the future, and that could be a problem. That's a problem for the ruling party. You sometimes you actually have to deliver. So those are the things. So I'm actually hopeful. On the Taiwan issue, I think a lot of contradictions will eventually resolve themselves. Like I was talking with Shang Yu, a rapper based in Taiwan. He actually said, outside of the big cities like Taipei or whatever, if you go to the countryside, a lot of people, they have these dishes. They receive all the channels from mainland. They watch like TV shows from mainland China, because it's the same culture, right? Like there's not much barriers, right? That separates Taiwan and mainland China culturally. So with the rise of China, the gravitational pull of mainland China will be stronger on people of Taiwan.
So their belief is effectively, look, we don't need a war, we don't need conflict, we don't need any of this stuff. Just our economy, culture, these things are going to pull Taiwan to us just inexorably anyway. I mean, we may get a random political party that's antagonistic, but for all intents and purposes, over the course of time, they will reintegrate with us.
Yeah.
If a new political party got in office that was not an independence party, would they be able to make moves towards China in that way?
Well,
I mean, the United States is military on the soil.
I mean, we see. I mean, before the DPP party get into power, back in 2010s, when KMT had the presidency, they actually were making moves to further integrate the economy. They were about to sign a free trade deal with China. And then there was a soft color revolution that happened in Taiwan. There was a bunch of youth who occupied the parliament. It's called the Sunflower Movement. And they and that scuttled the deal. And that brought in the DPP into the presidency in the following the election. And so those, I was talking with people in Taiwan, particularly Shang Yu. He think, yeah, that's definitely a color revolution. A lot of these so-called student leaders have the backing of all these like NED or NED adjacent funding. And so U.S. still have a lot of power in Taiwan. They can always sabotage the straight relationship. But I think over long term, I'm optimistic over long term. I'm not saying this is like kind of there's going to be a sea shift anytime soon, like a flip flop in the public opinion, 180 degrees. But I think gradually, slowly, the gravitational pull of mainland will be able to pull Taiwan back.
Last question. Indonesia. I've just left Indonesia. Loved the country. I was in Jakarta for 2 months. Apparently, I was an illegal immigrant because I overstayed my visa by 2 days. That scared the shit out of me at the airport.
Don't overstay the visa, man. You have to pay.
Don't do that, right? Yeah,
I made the mistake before.
Did you?
You're gonna have to pay. Don't do that.
Yeah, I didn't know what was going to take place because the guy, the security guard is like pissed off at me, right? And he's like,
no, you just have to pay. They'll just make you pay. That's what's going to happen. They're going to make sure you pay.
It's so expensive. Like they charge you like $100 a day every day that you overstay your visa, something like that's close to it.
I paid $700 one time because at that time that's when I first met with my wife. We were vacationing on an island, and I totally forgot about renewing my visa. And then after I got back, I was like, "Oh crap! I overstayed 7 days. I had to pay $700." So yeah.
Ouch! Yeah, when you're at the airport, and you try to get out, and it's like, "Hey man, my passport's not working. Come with me." It's like, yeah, man. They weren't dicks about it, but they were obviously very stern and didn't necessarily like the fact that you overstayed your visa. It was only about 2 days. I just got the days wrong. While I was there, I was watching the event with Trump and the various other leaders. And the president, I think it was prime minister, goes to Trump and says, "I need to talk to your son." And he says, "I'm, how do you say, we're not safe." He says something to that effect, "We're not safe." What does he mean by that? Is he concerned about, while I was there were protests at various locations in Indonesia. Is he thinking that this is a color revolution and that, let's say, there are other forces that are behind this, that it's not necessarily organic? And if he deals with Trump, he could somehow put the kibosh on the protests? I mean, we just saw the Gen Z as you point out, the Sunflower Movement. These are like Gen Z protests. They even have a name now, where you get a bunch of kids, throw those kids at a government because they don't know anything about anything,
Well, I
and
mean,
allow them to try to overthrow the government. Is that what he's
so
concerned about? Because I didn't
well,
understand what he was talking about.
I have no idea too. I can't speak for any world leader. I have no like special contact with them. But
Yeah.
the protests. I mean, I understand why people protest. Like the youth in Indonesia, they facing, I mean, some same problem that the youth in the West faces. They face a very competitive job market.
Yes.
They think the economy is not. Indonesia is still a very young country, so it has a lot of young people. And the thing is, Indonesia is still not growing. It's growing pretty fast, but not fast enough to provide jobs for all these young people entering the job market. Um,
Right.
and they're not happy about the government corruption. There's a lot of corruption in Indonesia, so all these things are very understandable.
Hmm.
But what is not understandable is people firebombing government buildings and burning government workers to death. Um,
Right.
and I was told, it's not the students that do it. It's not the students who are firebombing the government buildings. And so that, what does that mean? Does that mean they're provocateurs? I mean, it's possible. And I would not, from my limited interaction with young Indonesians here, I also don't think average students would just go
Yeah.
certainly go
It's
attack
like I'm in
government
class and then all of a
installations.
sudden I'm going to firebomb a
Yeah,
government building. That seems a bit
yeah,
extreme.
yeah. So I mean, I don't know. I can't say, but I have to. Only thing I know is a lot of my Chinese Indonesian friends were very worried because they remember what happened in 1998. Yeah,
What happened in
because
1998?
well, a lot the protests against the government turned against the Indonesian Chinese community. A lot of
Oh,
the Indonesian Chinese community, they were many people were killed, raped, many had to flee the country. So a lot of Chinese Indonesian were very traumatized by what happened in 1998. And my circle of friends, they're usually my age. So they were there in 1998, when they experienced that. So I could see they're trying to maintain a calm demeanor, but I could see, they were very worried when the protests break out. But I mean, so far it looks like it's contained. Hopefully the hopefully the economy will keep growing fast enough to provide more job opportunity for the young people in Indonesia. I mean,
yeah.
right now there's a lot of if as long as Indonesia can maintain its stability, I think the future is still quite bright because the
Hmm.
rise of China will lift all boats in the neighborhood. Right now, there's a lot of investment flowing out of China into Indonesia. A lot of manufacturing is coming to Indonesia as part of the supply chain is now moving out of China. But a lot of this is part of that is the Trump tariff. But now that what the Trump tariff actually did is now instead of simply supply chain moving out of China, now you have an integrated supply chain that composed of China and all the surrounding neighborhood. Because
Yeah.
especially the countries in Southeast Asia, they will get
Yeah.
the manufacturing first. Like I saw Frank, what is that? Farid Zakaria was saying on Twitter, was saying, "Oh, India is gonna, be the next manufacturing superpower. Is going to replace China." I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's actually going to be Southeast Asia that will benefit the most because, first of all, Southeast Asia is in the same time zone. Most of Southeast Asia is in the same time zone or just 1 hour difference with
Yes.
China, and they have cultural proximity and geographic proximity. So this is why it's a lot easier to ship Chinese machine tools and parts straight from factories in Pearl River Delta to ports in Vietnam, Thailand, or Indonesia. So what the Trump tariff actually just accelerated existing trend, which is Chinese capital are coming to Southeast Asia, and the Chinese supply chain is getting integrated with the supply chains in Southeast Asia. So now, this is why I'm pretty fairly optimistic about Southeast Asia. I think
Mhm.
like I said, when the rise of China will lift all boats in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I love Jakarta. I thought it was great. I had no issue with Indonesia. In fact, I actually like Malaysia also. And I like Malaysia so much, I even thought about going back to Malaysia at the end of
Yeah.
travels. Last thing before I let you go, since you brought up tariffs, this is your favorite president talking about tariffs.
I hear they're doing that, and that's okay with me. They're passing legislation, or the Republicans are putting in legislation that very tough, it's sanctioning, et cetera, on any country doing business with Russia. They may add Iran to that, as you know. I suggested it. So any country that does business with Russia will be very severely sanctioned. We may add Iran to the formula, yeah.
So 500% tariffs on Russia, China, India, and any other rando country. I would imagine he means even European countries that are getting oil from the back end. This is clownish. Do you even believe Taco is gonna like? Even if that came to his desk, do you think Taco would sign that bill?
Look, we have been through this. We have been doing this for the last 8 months, man. I mean, 7 and 8 months. Like, who is he kidding? Like
I don't know.
he gotta have to keep the appearances, and he gotta keep appearances of winning, right? Winning so much that you'll be tired of winning. I think by now everybody's tired of winning. Just stop it already. Just please stop.
It's like, dude, you're winning too much, man. Calm down. Carl, man, I always appreciate these conversations, and I thank you for it. Honest to God, I really do. Carl Jha, he's host of Silk and Steel podcast, focused on China and surrounding region and their history, culture, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Jha. You can follow his podcast at Steel Silk N, the letter N, and subscribe to his podcast on patreon.com/silk and steel. Carl, you have a fantastic show, Carl. And I thank you for joining me, man. You be safe, okay?
Thank you. Anytime.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Now.
All right. Shout out to Carl. Yeah, people are tired of winning, man. Tired of winning. I don't know how many times you can do this and keep credibility. I honest to God, don't. The oil prices in the United States have started to rise. A lot of that has to do with the tariffs that Donald Trump is putting on other countries and putting pressure on Russian energy. What does that mean if you are trying to pass a bill for 500% sanctions or tariffs, whatever he wants to call it, on every country doing business with that same country? I find it to be absurd. What time is it? All right, Dimitri is going to be here in roughly a minute. So I'm not necessarily going to go into a new topic because there's kind of no point in going to a new topic. What I will say is if you guys dig this content, you find yourself coming back to this channel often, like the video, share the video. You can support the Patreon, PayPal, buy me a coffee, all of those good things. By the way, you're going to like this. John Helmer is going to be on the show on Thursday. He's coming on at 7:15 in the morning. I hit him up. He was gracious. He was like, hey, I watch your show. I was like, oh, you do? Oh, that's so cool. So he's going to be on the show on Thursday. We have Luca. Jamal, I have to go. Wait a minute, I have to call this a morning show, and yet you provide no makeup tips, fashion recommendations, and have no delicious recipes. Oh yeah, I need to get some delicious recipes going. I am partial to BLTs. I can make a hell of a honey barbecue chicken fat bastard sauce that I like to make. I can give those. I'm not sure what else I can give you in regards to recipes. Makeup tips, not so much. I will give you politics though, and we can discuss all sorts of things that are taking place around the world, including people getting killed, maimed, shot, wars, prevention of wars, and of course, horrible deals that Dimitri and I are going to discuss right now. My man, Dimitri Lascaris, how you doing, man? You doing okay?
Little groggy. How are you doing this morning?
I am doing all right. I'm doing all right. We're just a little groggy. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And just for the audience, Dimitri Lascaris, lawyer, journalist, activist, Montreal, Quebec. Dimitri runs the show Reason to Resist. Dimitri, I've been binging your content recently. Damn good show. Damn good show. I guess the thing we have to talk about is the quote unquote stabilization force that the United Nations passed. They passed it in its entirety. Russia and China gave a strongly worded speech and then abstained on their veto. I've heard some people make the point of saying this is kind of like them abstaining on Libya, where it's like, hey, we're not going to get involved, even though we're going to give a strongly worded condemnation statement. I think I started the show off pointing out that I don't really care about statements anymore. We have all sorts of politicians in this country that give statements about some of anything. Donald Trump claims he's not a pedophile. I don't believe him. That's a statement for all intents and purposes. I care about what you do. And if you had the power to veto it, that's not going to war. That's not launching a missile. That's not doing anything other than saying, yeah, we think this is a horrible idea. We don't think this achieves the objectives that they're setting out to claim that this achieves. There's no two-state solution in this. The dog and pony showed that it is. And so, yeah, we're calling a veto on this. They didn't do that. They just abstained. Give me your take.
I'm going to try not to employ any obscene language, Jamal.
You're welcome to.
But,
You're welcome to.
I can't find the words to express how disgusted I am by this resolution. I just can't. I mean, one of the things that just offends me in ways that I can't even express is that we are demanding as an international community through this heinous resolution that the victims of a genocide, be one that is ongoing, by the way, that the world has failed to stop for over 2 years, are being divested of their light weapons, or will be if this resolution is implemented. And the perpetrators of the genocide remain armed to the teeth with every imaginable destructive capacity known to humanity, including nuclear weapons. Yep. The United Nations is not even talking about disarming Israel. Israel has not only forfeited the right to have armaments, Israel has forfeited the right to exist. And just as Germany ought to have been divested of that right, so too should Israel. But Israel will continue to exist. Israel will continue to remain armed to the teeth, and Israel will remain in physical occupation for an indefinite period of time under this resolution of over 50% of the Gaza Strip, which was already, as you and I have talked about, one of the most densely populated parts of the world. Yeah. And this is quite apart from offending the most basic sense of human decency, it is also a violation of international law. The International Court of Justice ruled last year that Israel's occupation of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank is illegal and must end forthwith. And this resolution doesn't even accomplish that much. It is basically replacing one occupier with another. I haven't had a chance, by the way, to read the entire resolution, so I'm going on the basis of media reports. Mm-hmm. But I've read several. And doesn't require, it imposes no penalty upon Israel for failing, for example, to supply the Palestinians, those who have survived this horror, with sufficient humanitarian aid. I understand that this resolution endorses the idea of this peace board, which Trump says he's going to lead. So the resolution, if that is in fact accurate, that report, the resolution will put in charge of the Gaza Strip the person who is ultimately responsible, at least since January of this year, for the genocide. Yep. So this brings me to China and Russia. I think the last time you and I talked about China and Russia, which probably was the last time we spoke Um, I made the point that history, recent history, leads inexorably to the conclusion that the Chinese and Russian governments do care deeply about sovereignty, but really only about their own sovereignty. They don't really care at the end of the day, not enough to take meaningful action about the sovereignty of other states. And they'll do business with anybody. I recently learned, I wasn't aware of this, that we already knew, it was easily determined that China was one of the largest trading partners of Israel.
Yep.
Well, I recently learned that Russia is one of the largest suppliers of oil to Israel. And this came through a report by Oil Change International about which countries have been providing the main fuel supplies to Israel during the past 2 years. And according to Oil Change International, Russia provides a huge amount of oil through Kazakhstan. For some reason, the oil is sent to Kazakhstan. I think it might be refined in Russia, but it's coming from Russia. And then Russia on its own separately provides a particular type of fuel that is important to the functioning of the Israeli economy. Would they do that if they cared about international law, if they believed in the Geneva Convention, the Genocide Convention? Would they, refrain from exercising a damn veto? So basically, I'm completely convinced that Russia and China don't really care about the international legal order at all. They care only about themselves, the governments of these countries. And you may say that's perfectly legitimate. You may say that's their job. Their job is to prioritize the interests of their own people to the exclusion of all others. And if they refrain from vetoing this resolution, evidently they believe there was some benefit to their countries in so doing. I don't really give a damn. At the end of the day, they are signatories to the Genocide Convention. They are signatories to the UN Charter. They are signatories to the Geneva Conventions. No one put a gun to their heads and told them to sign those treaties, amongst others. I could name quite a few others that they're parties to that oblige them to put a stop to this. And instead, they can't even exercise their veto. I don't want to put the primary blame on them. To be clear, the people who are primarily responsible are those who are arming Israel and who are putting forward this resolution and who say they're going to send in their troops to disarm the Palestinians, the victims of this genocide, while leaving Israel armed to the teeth. They're the ones who are primarily culpable. But don't tell me that China or Russia care a damn about an effective international legal order and the treaties, the foundational humanitarian treaties that they have signed on to. We now have proof beyond a shadow of a doubt that they don't. They prioritize their own sovereignty and national interest over everything else.
Why do you think that they didn't use that veto? I mean, they went with the excuse, well, all of these vassal states, Arab vassal states, went along with it. And so even though we don't necessarily like it, for example, I was reading Russia's statement. It says, we already had the unfortunate experience of seeing solutions to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict pushed through the United States, bringing about the opposite results of what was intended. Don't say we didn't warn you. And then they abstain. Like, that's what annoys me, right? It's this idea of, this sucks. We don't like this. This is horrible. This is going to have the opposite results of what they're saying it's going to have. However, we're not going to intervene on this at all. He continues. He says, we've had the unambiguous public statements coming out of the highest echelons of Israel's leadership stating that it is unacceptable to establish a Palestinian state. Unfortunately, these key components did not make it into the U.S. draft. It also lacks any clarity about the time frame for the transfer of Palestinian authority of control over the Gaza and any certainty surrounding the Board of Peace, quote unquote, I'm going to put quotes in, of the International Stabilization Force, the ISF, which, according to the text of the resolution we adopted, would appear to be able to act absolutely autonomously without any regard for the position nor the opinion of Ramallah. This may entrench the separation of the Gaza Strip from the West Bank. It is reminiscent of the colonial practices of the League of Nations' British mandate for Palestine, when the opinion of the Palestinians themselves was not taken into account. All of that's true. All of that's true, right? But we abstain. And I could get the Chinese statement also, which is that radically different from the Russian statement in this case. What do you think their motivation is? Why do you think they abstain? Meaning, to make a statement like that, where you're calling out the flaws of a particular piece of bill that's going to the UN Security Council, for God's sake. And mind you, I remember when they passed the ceasefire through the UN Security Council, and the U.S. says this is a non-binding resolution. Meaning the U.S. was like, yeah, we don't care. Let this pass. Why would they be okay with this going through?
I have no goddamn idea. I mean, I cannot imagine what they're thinking. All I can do is speculate that there's some kind of deal struck, that they got something. They got something out of something that they value in exchange for refraining from exercising this veto. Because it otherwise makes no sense to me, Jamal. I saw a report in the Israeli media that a few days ago, Vladimir Putin called the war criminal Netanyahu, and apparently he initiated the call. There's no way they didn't talk about this resolution. Of course they talked about this resolution. And something, I can only guess that there was some kind of a deal struck there, and it may have involved the Americans, and there's something that matters to the Russians in that region, maybe to the Chinese. I have no doubt also that they were being pressured by the Arab autocracies, but they know full well that Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Bahrain and all those, tyrants, their leaders are in the back pocket of Washington. They know that, and they're not exercising independent judgment, and they're not acting in the interests of the Palestinian people, or even their own people for that matter. They know all of that. So I don't think that pressure at the end of the day should have mattered much. They should have said, we can in good conscience allow this resolution to pass. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if Mahmoud Abbas was pressuring the Russians and the Chinese to sign off on this. He wants Hamas to be disarmed. I don't care what he's saying publicly. He wants Hamas to be disarmed. He wants them to be removed from power, and he wants to be inserted ultimately, or his successor, into a leadership role in the Gaza Strip, in the whole of occupied Palestine, where he can then proceed to collaborate with the occupier throughout the entirety of what remains of Palestinian territory. So maybe, I don't know, if there wasn't a secret deal, maybe they just felt they didn't want to offend all of these local players in a region that's strategically important. But it's completely inconsistent, as I say. I just can't stress this enough, in every conceivable way with Russia's and China's obligations under core treaties of the international legal order.
Here's a question. How do they intend to disarm Hamas?
Well, this brings us to the question of implementation, right?
Right.
So although I do condemn this in the strongest possible terms, and again, I stress that I place the primary responsibility for this on Western governments, not on China and Russia. It's another question altogether whether this thing's going to be implemented. So who's going to go in there? There's been a lot of talk of, Pakistan, Indonesia, Turkey, Egypt. Are they really going to go in there and attempt to disarm Hamas after Israel failed miserably to do so? Did they think that the Islamic Jihad and Hamas and the other resistance groups that are currently armed in the Gaza Strip are going to hand over their weapons just because they're coming from predominantly Arab or Muslim states? They've come out very clearly, again, not just before, but after the resolution was adopted, the resistance groups have said, hell, no way, we're not giving them up. So how are they going to succeed where Israel failed for over 2 years, despite having inflicted what is effectively a nuclear demolition? I mean, it looks like a nuclear, bomb went off there. I don't know that these people are that deluded that they think they're going to be able to do this. And if they attempt it, they're going to suffer serious casualties. So I remain very skeptical. Maybe at the end of the day, this is why the Chinese and the Russians, I don't know, maybe this influenced them. Maybe they thought, look, this thing's a pipe dream. So yeah, you want to try and go in there and, disarm the resistance. Give it your best shot, man. But we think you're going to fail. Maybe that was their calculus.
That was my thought too, that they looked at this and thought to themselves, good luck with that. That's going to look horribly. Oh, that's going to fail miserably. And they didn't necessarily want to stand in the way of something that they thought was already going to, as you point out, be a pipe dream. I think I had Mark on yesterday. Mark was like, yeah, I don't believe this is going to happen. Like, meaning regardless of the resolution, regardless of all of the plans and everything else, How do you plan to pull this off? How are you going to get Hamas to give up their weapons? Turkish, Indonesian, whatever other troops that effectively go in. How do you expect? What are you going to do? Wage a war on Hamas also? Like, I don't know how this works or how this is supposed to work. Or what are they going to use Israel as a cudgel? They say, well, Israel is going to keep bombing and killing until you give up your weapons. Is that what they're going to do?
Yeah,
I don't know how they.
Will Israel even allow them to go in? I mean, I don't even know that Israel will allow that. You know,
Yeah.
It doesn't want Arab and Muslim troops in the Gaza Strip. It wants the Gaza Strip for itself. So I don't even know if that's going to be a hurdle that Trump will ultimately overcome. Israeli opposition to any foreign military presence in the Gaza Strip. So, this seems to me to be just a recipe for more suffering and disaster at the end of the day. I also want to add one other thing. Sorry, Jamal.
No, please.
You know, although I do believe that all peoples of the world need to apply pressure on their governments to respect international law and to enforce international law in all circumstances. I've given up on the United Nations. For me, the United Nations is completely discredited. I was already on the verge of giving up on them, sort of morally and politically, and advocating for, the United States as an institution for what it matters. My voice is just one of many. But no, I'm done with the United Nations. That is a completely discredited, illegitimate, fatally flawed organization. And the flaws of the United Nations start at the top. And we need to get rid of the idea that any state should be a permanent member of the UN Security Council and no state should have a veto. The United Nations needs to be democratized, and it needs to be given an effective enforcement mechanism that reflects the will of humanity, not of individual governments, but of humanity as a collectivity. And until we have that kind of an organization at the apex of international law and the international legal order, we're going to see a lot more injustice and suffering and lawlessness in this world. The United Nations is a failure.
Dimitri, you're saying more like me. I make the point of saying there's no such thing as international law because there is no Leviathan over other nations. And I don't know how you do that again if you have one hegemon, how does anything that the UN passes matters? Like the hegemon can do whatever he wants for all intents and purposes. And yeah, you may say economic thing, but for all intents and purposes, the US has just did a trade war against the world on its own, for God's sake. And you might have had one or two other countries that tell it to F off, but for all intents and purposes, many countries knuckled under. Even if it's just for the short period of time, even if it's just to give Donald Trump this idea of, okay, daddy, until Donald Trump leaves office. They still played that role. And so that is it sounds like what you're calling for is a world government of sorts, because that's what it would almost take.
No, I had a friend a lawyer friend back in the early days of my career who did a master's degree at Harvard, and he had this, he wrote this thesis about, in which he explained this idea of concentric circles of sovereignty. And he said, there's sovereignty exists in many realms, and the way to deal with, in that case, his article was about Canada. He came from Quebec, and he was concerned about how do you divide powers between the people of Quebec, who believe themselves to be a separate nation, the federal government of Canada. But in principle, this, I think, applies also to international relations. Some aspects of sovereignty need to be ceded to an international organization, and limited aspects of sovereignty. Okay, for most powers would be vested in national governments and their subunits in a properly constructed international legal order. You don't give up all of your sovereignty. You don't even give up most of your sovereignty, but you do have to give up some sovereignty in order for there to be an international peace, and the kinds of order and stability that we require in order to have international commerce and respect for human rights. You have to. And that's precisely what all of these treaties were supposed to be. The Genocide Convention, the UN Charter, the Geneva Conventions, the treaty against the prohibition, the treaty on the prohibition against nuclear weapons. All of these things are limitations on the national sovereignty of states, which these states in theory were consensually agreeing to accept for the good of all peoples, including their own. But at the same time, they can retain a very large degree of national sovereignty. This is not new. It's not me. I'm not coming up with this. Is not a radical idea that I came up with. This was the whole notion. This was supposed to be the fundamental, concept of the post-World War II international legal order. But it turned out to be a fraud. And all I'm saying is we need to make it a reality. And the United Nations is not going to achieve that goal. It is fatally flawed in its structure. That's it. That's all I'm saying.
No, I accept that. I guess my thing is, how do you do that? Like, is Russia, China, India, America, like any country that has the capability of meeting, I guess, for example, consent is the issue, right? Like, I can centrally agree, but I don't, I can't bomb a government building, even if I want to. It's not about me consenting to not bomb a government building. I will get beaten, potentially killed, and at the very least thrown into a cage for doing so. Who's going to do that on the international stage for any of these world actors that have nukes, or any of these world actors that have the capability of selling the rest of the world to F off? It's that part that I don't quite get. Like, I don't know how you restrain countries when they get to that level, into that status. If you are Malaysia, for example, or if you are Indonesia, if you are, let's say, a smaller country, Timbuktu, then yeah, you would want to be a part of that international order, because that's protection for you. That's like you being protected under the law for weakness on some level. I just don't know how you do that with the larger countries. And I don't see any of these countries ceding that level of power and that level of responsibility to, let's say, a United Nations or to any kind of body. That's the crux of the issue to me.
Yeah.
I mean, but tell me if I'm wrong on this. Maybe I'm missing something.
You're 100% right. The governments that are currently in power will not cede that authority to an international body, to anybody else. The best answer that I can give you, Jamal, is that reform begins at the bottom. The reform needs to happen at the top, but we need to force it as people from the ground up. And that means we have to empower different people. But there's a whole bunch of reasons why we need to do that anyways. Look at what's happening to the world, man. Whatever you may think of the United Nations and the flaws of the structure of the United Nations, we're in serious trouble. We're in deep trouble as a species. And we're on the verge of nuclear annihilation. All indications are that it's going to get worse, not better, the risk of nuclear annihilation. So the very first thing I think that we as peoples must demand is nuclear disarmament. And this is not a radical idea. Again, this is, even Ronald Reagan was convinced of the need to disarm. To at least vastly reduce nuclear arsenals and ultimately eliminate them altogether. And there were, as I mentioned, one of those treaties that were entered into recently, the prohibition on nuclear weapons. By the way, in Canada, where I am, Justin Trudeau disgracefully refused to sign on, even though we aren't, we don't have nuclear weapons, don't aspire to have them in Canada, because of pressure from the United States government. They didn't want this treaty to be legitimized. So whatever. But the point here is that I think the first step is that we need to demand from our elected officials nuclear disarmament. Okay, so the people don't have that kind of destructive capacity at their disposal. That poses an insuperable obstacle to the kinds of international legal reforms that I'm talking about. And then the next step is to actually empower people, elect governments that are committed to a fundamental reform of the United Nations. But the current governments, I agree completely. It's a pipe dream that these people are going to do either of those things.
I think I agree with your first premise. We start at the bottom, but I think for me, starting at the bottom means it all falls apart first. Because if you think about it, the order that was created after the Second World War only happened because of the Second World War. It didn't happen because things were great, or it didn't happen because things were going well. It happened because everything fell apart. And my fear and my strong belief is it happens when everything falls apart, providing there's a humanity left on this planet that can cobble together the pieces. I hope I'm wrong on that. God knows I hope I'm wrong. But
I agree with you. That I think is ultimately how this is going to play out. And the question is whether we're going to survive that collapse.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I was reading through the or what is it called? The UN passes resolution. So what is it called? COGAT. And I'll just read this part. This is drop site news. It says, with today's passage of the US-led resolution, oversight of aid entering Gaza moves from Israel's COGAT to the United States aligned Board of Peace. I hate that name. God, I hate the propaganda associated with this. And the states participating in it. The decision marks the first major structural change to Gaza's access regime since Israel seized control of the territory in 1967. And it says, under the resolution, the Board of Peace becomes the central gatekeeper for all humanitarian aid. The text makes clear the board oversees, quote, full resumption of humanitarian aid, unquote. All aid must enter Gaza, quote, in cooperation of the BOP, unquote. The operational entities under the BOP handle delivery, distribution, public services, humanitarian assistance. These bodies operate under an international legal personality controlled by the BOP. I guess that's Tony Blair and Donald Trump. It said the resolution also authorizes the BOP to create agencies with authority over movement of people and goods. It says paragraph 4 empowers them to, quote, take any measure to facilitate the movement of persons in and out of Gaza, unquote, which includes convoys and border procedures. This is a lot of legal rhetoric. And this idea of any measure to facilitate the movement of persons in and out of Gaza, that could go dark quick, right? I mean, that could be people who shuffle off to other prisons. That could be, let me ask you this. Is there any value in this moving over from Israel into this kind of new governing board that would allow humanitarian aid to come into the country? Or yes or no on this?
That's the key question, Jamal, and I don't see any meaningful difference. I mean, Trump is going to be in charge, or whoever the U.S. president is, of this so-called Board of Peace. And the U.S. government effectively is in charge of Israel. I mean, who are we kidding here, man? Israel is a giant U.S. military base masquerading as a country. I've said this over and over again. And it does precisely what maybe not precisely, maybe sometimes it departs marginally from directives from Washington. But essentially, and as you know, Lawrence Wilkerson has said, somebody who's high inside the U.S. government for years, it's America's attack dog in the Middle East. So nominally, I mean, in a sense, this arrangement, if it is actually implemented, is going to be more honest in the sense that the people who are actually running the show in occupied Palestine, the U.S. government, will be formally in charge of these things, including the delivery of humanitarian aid. They were always in charge. They always had the ability to force Israel to give the Palestinians sufficient humanitarian aid, or to direct them to restrict the amount of aid going in, to suffocate the civilian population of Gaza. We should assume, rational people assume, that everything Israel has been doing over the last 2 years has been done with the full consent and agreement and facilitation of the United States government. So so now they're pretending, they've stopped pretending that Israel is making these decisions without the consent of the U.S. government. That's all they're doing. But at the end of the day, the people who are ultimately responsible for the genocide are in charge under this resolution, and that's the U.S. government.
Yeah, agreed. What do you make of, I know you've probably been paying attention, maybe, I don't know if it's a flat fact, but what's been taking place in the United States regarding Trump talking about tariffing the world, attacking Venezuela. I get the sense that we're at the beginning of a wag the dog moment. This was actually they made a movie about this, right? Where the U.S. ends up attacking Canada in order to hide from something else. But in real life, it was in relation to Bill Clinton, that Bill Clinton ends up attacking the Middle East in order to hide from the Monica Lewinsky scandal, effectively wag the dog, trying to distract from one thing and doing something else in order to do so. Venezuela seems to be that thing. Donald Trump is mired in the whole Epstein thing here in the United States, with all sorts of emails making it very clear that at the very least, it insinuates that Donald Trump was very close to Epstein, even during his presidency, and that he was perfectly clear about the young girls that Epstein was abusing. I would go so far as to call him a pedophile, but that's a bit strong without direct evidence of it. But fair enough. I'll stand by that. You were friends with this guy for all of these years. You were hanging out with this guy as he was engaging with this abuse. You have all sorts of powerful people that were involved. Obviously, Prince Andrew was involved. You have all sorts of people that were in those emails. And Trump has done any and everything in his power to prevent those emails from coming to light. So now we're seeing this simultaneously with threats against Venezuela, with Trump saying, hey, maybe I'm okay with talking to Maduro. Apparently, there was already conversation between the United States and Venezuela, where Maduro even owned up to the idea of saying, hey, you can get the oil, we'll give you resources, lead me to my devices. And Marco Rubio convinced Donald Trump, it is better if we just take Venezuela. This seems to be another quagmire that the United States is about to get involved in. It's failed with Iran, it's failed with Russia, it's failed with China, and now it seems to be beaten back into this kind of Monroe Doctrine 2.0, where, oh, by the way, failed with Yemen, a much smaller power, by the way. And now it's gone after Venezuela. What do you make of this?
First of all, let's be clear. Donald Trump, do I know whether Donald Trump actually engaged in pedophilia? No. But he's worse than a pedophile. He's a genocidal mass murderer. Donald Trump has been enabling, facilitating, and directing the mass slaughter of children in Gaza. And there's still open, unambiguous starvation, Jamal. You can't do worse things than this. This man's capable of anything. And that's precisely why we should be very worried about what he's going to do now with those military forces in the Caribbean. And let me just talk about, I've been watching in amazement what's going on in the public discourse over the release of these Epstein files. And I think there's a full-blown collapse, not only in support for Israel unfolding before our very eyes in the United States, but there's a full-blown collapse in support for Donald Trump. And his approval rating, I think, is now lower than it has been at any point in his presidency.
Yes.
And it's going to get worse as this information comes out. I think, it's quite clear that the reason why he did this U-turn and said, okay, the Republicans in Congress should vote for the release of the Epstein files, because he knew he was going to lose. And so rather than suffer the humiliation of losing after putting so much pressure on Republicans to vote against it, he wanted to be seen to be in agreement with it. But when that stuff comes out, if in fact they release, they do what the resolution apparently calls for, which is the mass release of all the Epstein files, I can only imagine things are going to get much worse for him in the public discourse, and he's going to be tempted to do something like this. And I think, what is he going to do with those military forces in the Caribbean if not use them? But at the same time, he's in a very, very, I think, difficult spot if he's thinking at all rationally, which is doubtful. 15,000 troops and a bunch of naval, assets aren't going to remove the government of Venezuela and replace it with whatever Donald Trump wants to be in charge. That is not likely to happen. I understand from, some U.S. military experts, independent of the government, who have been talking about this, that Venezuela actually has the capacity to sink some of those vessels. Can you imagine if they sink a destroyer or, the USS Gerald Ford itself? I mean, the United States will be utterly discredited as a military power. It already, its military, prowess and capabilities are in question because of the humiliating withdrawal from Afghanistan. They couldn't even, with the whole of NATO backing the United States, the whole of NATO in 20 years was not able to defeat the Taliban. And now they're having their asses handed to them by the Russians. The, Ansar Allah put an ass kicking on the U.S. Navy, the most powerful Navy in the world in the Red Sea. And if they attempt some kind of aggression, open and direct aggression against Venezuela, and they end up losing some, in a very visible manner, key naval assets, I think the United States will be completely discredited as a military power, and Trump will be in an even worse position than he is now. So I don't know what he's going to do. I wouldn't be surprised if this is all bluff at the end of the day, but is there a risk that this man is going to try to engage in some kind of distraction? Absolutely. Absolutely there is. And could it turn out to be a real disaster for the American people, not just for the Venezuelan people?
Yeah, it's funny. Cixin Liu, in his book, The Three-Body Problem, and I think it was the Dark Forest one, when they were talking about, there's always this talk about how the Simpsons are prophetic because Simpsons continuously get stuff right like 20 years later. They nail it for some reason. I don't know how they do it. It's like Trump 2024 or something like that, and they nail it. They nail that stuff. Cixin Liu, in his book, he had this part about Venezuela and about how the U.S. attacked Venezuela. And as you're reading, you're like, what? The U.S. attacked Venezuela? What the hell is he talking about? And here we are. Right? Where the U.S. seems to be on the verge of doing just that. And you're like, wow, it's amazing how some of this stuff, how it hits, like how they nail it. By the way, we got our ass kicked in that war, in the book, where the U.S. Got beaten by the guy in Venezuela, where they effectively pulled back, allowed the military to come back in, and effectively ran a guerrilla war that destroyed the U.S. military in Venezuela. Hopefully that doesn't come about. And we don't know what the Russians have dumped in Venezuela. I mean, the Russians have signed a strategic agreement with Venezuela. There were all sorts of ships, or let's say planes, that were dropping off military hardware or equipment. We don't know what that equipment is. The Russians haven't necessarily been open about it. You've had some Russian leaders who was like, hey, we shouldn't leave our allies behind. We have to defend allies. And obviously, Russia, China, and Iran has been somewhat close to Venezuela. And maybe that is the thought behind this also, that these other countries are now in our backyard, creating this kind of Cuban-esque crisis in the way that they look at it. Mm-hmm. Give me a take on that. Or you don't see that as being the primary reason or justification for it? Or maybe there are multiple reasons for it.
Oh, I think they would have, the United States government would have wanted, I shouldn't say the government, Trump would have wanted to engage in whatever military force they deem necessary to remove Maduro from power and install a U.S. puppet, because Venezuela has the largest oil resources in the world. That would have been, a temptation that Trump couldn't resist, whether or not the Russians are in there. If the Russians have been, in fact, delivering, air defense systems, offensive strike capability, missile strike capability, drones, whatever. I mean, this is just a even bigger recipe for disaster. But I don't think it's because the Russians are in there or the Chinese are in there. And apparently the Chinese are the largest foreign investor in Venezuela nowadays.
Yes.
That's not the primary motivation, I would think. I think the primary motivation is the oil.
Basically, get the energy.
And Trump is, not particularly, minded to hide that fact. He openly covets the oil resources of other countries.
Yeah.
But 15,000 soldiers and a bunch of missiles, is that going to, Venezuela is a huge country. It's a very difficult terrain to operate in. As I mentioned, I think previously, Jamal, I've been there a couple of times and seen that there are a lot of people in that country who are committed to Chavismo. They may, even if they're not necessarily huge fans of Nicolas Maduro, and they're very committed to their sovereignty, and they will do whatever, many of them will do whatever it takes to expel an invader and an occupier. And this could get real ugly really fast for the United States government. And I can't, none of us should rule out the possibility that Trump will just engage in an open, naked aggression against Venezuela in the days ahead.
Agreed. One last issue before I let you go. Al-Jilani, Al-Shara, whatever he wants to call himself, was in Washington having a conversation with some of the military personnel that was there. Secretary of War, Hegseth, like God of War, like that. It's more honest, so I accept it. I've always said that we should rename it, or we should go back to the old name, Department of War. But it's still kind of cartoonish. Either way, what do you think he was there for? What was the, like, why is he there having a conversation with the various military personnel in the United States?
I think that Trump wants to see Syria normalize with Israel, is my guess, and would like very much to see this, this so-called president, or whatever they call him nowadays, of the new Syrian nation to legitimize Israel's theft of Syrian land. The Trump administration, the first time around, was the first major government in the world to recognize Israel's illegal annexation of the Syrian Golan Heights. And it remains an outlier in that regard. The vast majority of states say that, and they're right, that that is a violation of international law, Israel's annexation of the Golan Heights. So I think he wants to see the Syrian government, the so-called Syrian government itself, legitimize the acquisition of that land. I think he wants to see any military threat within Syria negated, so that Israeli planes can effectively operate over the skies of Syria and American planes without any impediment. That opens up a route of attack against Iran. Right. Syria does have some resources that, American corporations covet. I'm sure that's part of it. But I think the overall objective is probably to see so-called normalization, which really what that means is subjugation to the United States government and its attack dog in the region. That's what normalization actually means. And that's what they want from Syria.
Now, he's been in Moscow. Apparently, representatives have gone to China.
Yeah.
What is this? Like trying to balance multiple forces for his own survival?
I don't know. I'm befuddled by this, this cozy relationship between al-Jawlani and the Russian government. I mean, I can understand why. I think it's consistent with the way the Russian government has operated for many years. So for example, there's these images that we've all seen of Vladimir Putin high-fiving with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, as though they're the closest of chums. And the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia is no better than Jawlani. He's just got much more power at his disposal, but the man is a ruthless mass murderer. For Christ's sakes. I mean, they were effectively committing a genocide in Yemen for years with the full support of Washington and other Western governments. So it doesn't surprise me to see Russia dealing with al-Jawlani, because as a practical matter, for the time being, he is in charge, at least of Damascus. But what kind of dealing are they doing? Because, the United States is driving the bus on this. So why would the United States tolerate given its overall attitude towards Russia, why would it tolerate close relations between and some form of coordination between al-Jawlani and the Russian government? I don't know. I really, it befuddles me that the United States is even tolerating this.
Agreed. It confused me too. That's what I'm asking. It's confusing to me. I don't quite get it. Dimitri, you are awesome, man. And you've been doing damn good work. Keep it up. Like I said, I've been binging your show for the last several weeks. You've been doing a fantastic job. Reason to Resist, that's Dimitri's channel on YouTube. Dimitri is, let me get the first part right. He is a lawyer, journalist, activist from Montreal, Quebec. Thank you for this, man. You be safe, okay?
Yeah, and you're doing a fantastic job too, Jamal. I love watching your show. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks, man. You be safe. All right, I see my man in the background, Michael Maloof. How you doing, Michael? You looking dapper today?
I'm great. Well, thank you. Yeah, I just
you doing all right?
I just got off another interview.
Oh, did you? Okay, so you're rotating interviews today. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Michael Maloof, he's former senior security policy analyst in the Office of Secretary of Defense, author, regular contributing analyst on RT and other media outlets. He has nearly 30 years of federal service in the U.S. Department of Defense. Michael, you are the man I wanted to talk to today. So Zelensky has decided, after having pretty much his entire energy grid destroyed, or at the very least taken out of commission, that he wants to now go to Istanbul or go to Turkey to have conversations with Witkoff on potential negotiations, quote unquote. Do you buy this?
No, he's had many opportunities. I don't believe a word that Zelensky says. Zelensky is looking for a lifeline, and he's basically a dead man walking. His war is over for all intents and purposes, and if he tries to concede any territory, he's a dead man, literally. So I think that he's got problems, and he boxed himself in. He should have agreed to the Minsk II agreements way back when. And this never would have happened. None of this would have happened. And he basically reaps what he sows.
So what is this? Just the stall, for all intents and purposes.
It is. It's all a stall. It's all a stall. Yeah. He's talked to Erdogan. Erdogan has offered multiple times, and no responses. I mean, it just goes back and forth. People get tired of it. I think that's probably why Trump is now offering a distraction, and that is conflict with Venezuela.
Is that what you call it? A distraction?
A distraction. It's a distraction. Get our minds and focus off of Ukraine.
Well, he's mentioned. I mean, Donald Trump is still talking about sanctions and whatnot. Like right here, this is.
He knows they're
Trump.
useless. He knows it. He said it. His advisors are telling him, why bother? And when I was in Moscow last year, I asked myself, where are the sanctions? I mean, everything is great. I mean, it's beautiful over there, and the economy is roaring. The shelves of grocery stores are stocked. So it's just, it goes on and on and on, and it's worse than a soap opera. It's worse than it's. I remember years ago, I stayed home because I was sick, and I watched one soap opera. It took 3 days for a plane to crash. That's the way. That's what I'm seeing here. It's just mindless. Consequently, people want change. If they think that MAGA is melting down, no, MAGA is not melting down so much as people want to see results, and they're impatient. And we're seeing this now with the affordability issue that has now risen up like the phoenix. Well, I think in the first quarter of next year, we may start seeing stuff if Trump gets his way, particularly with tariffs. And so it takes time. It's like trying to turn that proverbial aircraft carrier. It takes 10 to 12 miles to turn that aircraft carrier. And the same applies to the economy. You're not going to turn around this economy overnight. And it has to undo 4 years of complacency and nothing by the Biden administration, which had us up to 9% inflation rates and $5 to $6 gallons of gas. That's all been cut in half just within the first 10 months of the Trump administration. But people want to see results yesterday. You'll recall what Trump said. I was only in office for 3 days, and the Democrats were screaming about the high price of eggs. He said, look, I just got here. I mean, why are they high? They were high because of the Biden administration. Come on.
Then why is Trump backing off the tariffs? He's backing off the tariffs. Why is he backing
again?
off
He's using them as a weapon. He's using them. He's a very pragmatic guy. I'm not a spokesman for him, but certainly I see his strategy. He's using them to get leverage on his competition or opponent, and that's what he's used them for.
I know, but we pay tariffs.
What?
We pay tariffs. We pay those.
Well, you're getting into the issue. You're getting into the issue that the Supreme Court raised is a tariff, a tax on the American people, and it's still a question. I think if he uses them strategically, they don't have to be. They can actually bring in income. Keep in mind that the United States lived off of tariffs up until about 1918, and made all kinds of money. And they didn't have the income tax then. It was all tariffs. That's how the U.S. government made its money.
I know, Michael, but that was over 100 years ago.
Yeah, but the same principles apply. You use the tariffs in order to gain leverage on the one hand, but it's bringing in income, especially on protected industries. And it also is a leverage to get other countries to lower their tariffs. Look, you don't see any American cars driving around in China, and you don't see them in Japan, but you see millions of Japanese cars here in the United States. Hopefully that changes.
Yeah, because American cars suck in comparison to the cars that Japan or
doesn't matter. It's
China
just the principle of the thing about tariffs. I don't care about the quality. Quality will go up according to ability to, according to what the market bears. But you got to have fair trade.
Okay, I hear you. Quality matters.
Got to have fair trade. Competition is one other thing. But when you put these artificial barriers and non-tariff barriers in, like VAT taxes and all that stuff, that tends to interrupt the flow of things, and that creates issues, and that's what we're dealing with. That's what the trade war we're having right now.
I hear you.
That doesn't mean you agree.
No, but I hear you. I do hear you. Fair enough. Did you hear in Russian media that they tried to murder Shoigu? Apparently, Shoigu goes to visit his family at the cemetery, and they tried to plant a bomb, and in order to assassinate Sergei Shoigu, and they caught the people who effectively did it before the bomb went off. I mean, there's this image. I can't play that. There's an image of them going after the person who's effectively tried to do it. Now, Ukraine has ultimately admitted that they have tried to kill Putin on more than one occasion. It didn't necessarily work. Give me your take on this. I mean, there seems to be, yeah, please.
He's a public figure. He's going to be in the country's in war with the neighbor. Sure, they're going to go after the leadership. They're going to try and take him out. Israel demonstrated how if you take out the leadership of a country, it decimates their mainstream arguments, and so it's. But we also saw it earlier with the killing of the general who oversaw the chemical biological thing. It's the same thing. But when you go to Shoigu and those guys, that's pretty serious, and it'll probably point back to the Ukrainian intelligence service.
But Russia never reciprocates.
Well, I don't think they should for this reason that then that just opens up Pandora's box to making the leadership targets, ultimate targets, free flowing targets there. That can be bad. That would be very, very bad to go after each country's leadership like that. But Trump needs to put pressure on Zelensky to knock it off.
But as I pointed out, they've tried to kill Putin on more than one occasion.
Sure.
And the U.S. backs Israel when their decapitation strikes against Iran, against Hezbollah, against Hamas, even against in Qatar when they were going after the negotiation team. The U.S. was perfectly fine with them doing so.
Mm-hmm.
Why shouldn't?
Yeah, well, it just depends upon U.S. interests at the moment. We don't have only if it suits our policies. We make the rules, we can break them. We are the that's just the way the U.S. and Israel look at the world, look at the international world order, the rules-based order. We make those rules, we break those rules, and that's what we do.
Who's after Zelensky?
I'm not saying that I'm not advocating it. I'm not accepting responsibility for it. I'm just saying that's just the way it is.
Who is after Zelensky? And are Zelensky days numbered? I mean, this corruption scandal.
I think they're numbered. I would say Azov. I think it's more internal. Who would be after him, and such as the Azov group and whatever. They want to keep him on a very short tether. As it is, they have the Azov group and the other right-wing elements, the neo-Nazi elements within Ukraine, really have their own agenda apart from the Kyiv government. So, and they're just in lockstep now with the government simply because it's anti-Russian. But if he deviates, if Zelensky shows signs of wanting to negotiate with the Russians, then that's where they part. And I think that's what you're going to see. In terms of other countries who would, he's made investments in other countries based upon the corruption that he's been the leader of, and so he could vacate at any time, and maybe for self-preservation he ought to, but then you can never trust your bodyguards.
Whoa! Say that again. You can never trust your bodyguards. So you're saying that Zelensky, he better basically look behind his back. What is the difference between, let's say, what the Azov battalion or Azov group wants, or some of these neo-Nazi groups want, versus Zelensky? They seem to be in lockstep.
They want to take over. They basically want to make it a neo-Nazi country all over again, and they want the territories back. Look what Russia took in the Donbass and Luhansk regions was the main industrial center of Ukraine. The western portion is more agricultural, and you got cities and all that, but the main industrial portions are in the east. And so they're not only going to want that back, but they would like to have regime change, I think, in Russia as well. I've never heard them enunciate fully what their goals are, but certainly it's to create their new movement to get more of a neo-Nazi movement. Look at their symbols. Look who they mimic.
Yeah.
It's very self-apparent. Do they want world conquest? They already have a network that extends into the United States. That's how they do their recruiting. They have them. They train in the UK, in Wales.
They've extended in Africa also, apparently.
Yeah, in Africa. Yeah. So there is expansion elements there. No one's really looked at what the goal of the Azov group really is, but given its extensions and its networking, I would say it's meant to create a subtle new world order of its own to put the neo-Nazi element back into the political mainstream.
They don't seem to have the power to do that, though. I mean, they're
no, not yet,
territory.
but you build on it over time. You know, Rome wasn't built in a day.
True, true. From your take, have all negotiations have effectively stalled? I haven't heard Putin say anything else about it.
Lavrov, yeah, where are they going to go? Zelensky has agreed to come to the negotiating table, and neither side wants to cease fire. It's a stalemate. It's a military standoff. Now, you're going to probably see, given the winter coming in, you're probably going to see Putin enhance the bombardments, particularly of the critical infrastructures. As you pointed out, he went after the electrical system. Now he'll go after the other systems, and the gas and natural gas and other infrastructures, things that are vital for people to survive in the winter. Mm-hmm. And the Ukrainians who were in other countries, they're not going back. So it's really, the country is becoming a shell of itself. And you've also got the Poles, the Lithuanians, and the Hungarians. They all want portions of the western part of Ukraine because that's where they've got ethnic speakers, because it all used to be part of the Lithuanian Polish Republic back in the 18th century or something like that. So, you know, their feuds go back centuries, and the U.S. should not get involved in any of that stuff. And you look at our world wars, everything is a continuum from 300 years ago.
Yeah.
Why do we want to continue to support that? But you got old Lindsey Graham up there yelling and screaming about Ukraine and about going and supporting Israel. And look what Israel's doing. It's a country now engaged in genocide. And who's stopping them? Nobody.
Is that enough to force capitulation, or not so much?
I think that it's going to require a military victory in Ukraine. In Ukraine, you're speaking about Ukraine. In Ukraine, yeah. if there's no negotiation set up, and there's been ample opportunities to sit down and talk, and nothing's come of it. So what's the alternative?
I don't see the leverage on the United States or Europe to even force or push those talks. If that makes sense.
The United States has tried through Trump, and the Europeans don't have any oomph because their power is only predicated upon the U.S. backing, and the U.S. isn't backing them up. In fact, I think we're seeing the beginning of the end of NATO. It's evolving, and I think Putin is coming out stronger in all of this at this point. You see his popularity is still very high within the country. Yep. So I just and the sanctions have become meaningless. So everything comes around. What goes around comes around, and we're seeing that the one consistency in all of this is that Putin has just has kept his focus on his approach, and he hasn't deviated from it, and he's succeeding.
What do you say to the people who criticize that approach? Who said this should have went faster? He should have been far more aggressive, less inclined to be what's the word I'm looking for? Less inclined towards the negotiations, especially when it became clear that Trump wasn't interested in the negotiations. I mean, the Alaska thing is outrageous. It seems that there was some agreement on the table, and then Donald Trump goes back on the deal, immediately goes back to this idea of a ceasefire, increase the sanctions, like meaning whatever they agreed upon, or whatever tacit agreement that they effectively had, the United States effectively went completely back on that particular agreement. Do you think Putin had been too slow in his approach, too not more, like he should have been more aggressive, or that for all intents and purposes, this war is proceeding in the way that it should proceed, and the speed of the events is getting faster either way? Give me your take on that.
I think he'll pick up the tempo at this point. As I said, I think he's seen that no other options are coming about unless they can make some grand announcement that we haven't heard about yet. Maybe there are ongoing negotiations and discussions behind the scenes. But right now, I think the Russians have basically thought, well, everybody has tried and nothing's happened, and Ukraine continues on. So and you have the Europeans wanting to continue to backstop the Ukrainians, but with what? They're going to have to recast their entire production capability toward more of a warlike production if they intend to continue that war, but that is predicated in turn on U.S. support, and the U.S. isn't going to back it, and even J.D. Vance has made that clear in recent days. So we're at a stalemate. It's a stalemate right now, but there's a new element that has crept in here that no one's talking about, and that is a quid pro quo, some leveraging that Putin can use.
What do you mean?
It has to do with Venezuela. I think the fact that Venezuela is feeling threatened, I think Putin could say, look, if the United States and Britain and all these countries are going to be sending long-range missiles into Ukraine, I'm going to send Orezhniks into Venezuela. That will really alter the balance of power very fast, and that could either accelerate things or really bring things to a head. It'll bring things to a head very rapidly. And but that's the leverage he has.
Do you see them
Same
doing
with the
that?
Chinese, huh?
Do you see him doing that? I mean, Putin has been, I would use the term pragmatic in the way that he's engaged all of this stuff. That would be aggressive.
I think it's a tool he has, an arrow he has in the quiver. Let's put it that way. He may not use it immediately, but it's one that he has, and Trump basically gave him that weapon.
Yeah, because I don't see him wanting Venezuela to fall. Like, I don't get the sense
he doesn't.
that.
Nor do the Chinese. Venezuela owes the Chinese billions, given they have invested billions and billions of dollars in Venezuela. They can't stand to lose Venezuela. Besides that, Venezuela was one of the first countries in the Latin American area to belong to the Belt and Road Initiative of China. Mm-hmm. They sit on all these oil reserves. The U.S. doesn't need that oil. Now, China would like to have it. I'm certain, and so would it. But if the United States takes action in Venezuela, that then puts the United States in a very difficult position with respect to the other Latin American countries, because they'll think that they're next, like Colombia, Mexico, wherever there's a cartel. But cartels are just an entree. There's other considerations to change governments for regime change, and I think that's the ultimate goal by the United States with respect to Venezuela regime
How
change.
do you buy? I mean, there's been mixed media reports on Trump's seriousness about going into Venezuela. How serious do you think he is about this? If a government collapsing, yes. Pressure, yes. Airstrikes, troops invading. Do you foresee any of this taking place? So you think
Well,
he's bluffing?
he's been leveraging. You got to consider his approach. If you read chapter 2 of The Art of the Deal, his approach is to initially come off bombastically to get attention and to gain leverage. From there, you negotiate. And Maduro has actually said he wants to negotiate. And Trump yesterday in his news conference said he's willing to sit down and talk directly with Maduro. So what does he want? What he probably wants is maybe to turn those nationalized oil companies back over to their previous American owners, number one. Number two, to get Maduro to agree to lessen the influence of Russia and China and Iran in Venezuela. So there's a lot of foreign policy considerations and the whole notion of violations of, if you will, of the Monroe Doctrine. So of foreign interventions in our sphere of influence, and so this is beginning to come back to haunt us once again. So history's repeating itself. Also, Cuba.
Oh, go ahead. No,
Cuba
please.
I was going to say Cuba would be another possibility. It would be an excellent location for Russia to set up a submarine base, for example.
Yeah. How on earth could the U.S. make that argument after 3 years in Ukraine?
I know.
Well, they said Ukraine is an independent
We
nation.
can do it to everybody else, but they cannot do it to us. Come on. We are the United States of America.
That is outrageous. It's like all of these speeches. Oh, Ukraine is an independent nation. Ukraine can do whatever it wants. How can Russia say that they can't join NATO?
Yeah.
And then it's like, hey, we need
Again,
you to cut your.
you know, we're in their neck of the woods constantly. That for a change, they may want to come into ours. Look how the United States now is trying to creep back into Central Asia.
Yeah.
Trump just had a bunch of the leaders of Central Asian countries there, and they're all paying homage to him. That got my attention.
Paying homage.
Yeah, you know that should be very upsetting to Putin.
Mm-hmm.
Again,
just
what Putin and Trump could agree to on a more of a geostrategic basis is agree to respect for each country's sphere of influence. There could be that possibility coming into any negotiation. So and that's where I think that's why Trump wants ultimately to have better diplomatic ties with Russia. He could do it right now. They could begin acting and begin working on joint programs. And oh yeah, you got this little war on the side, but that's not of interest to us. Take care of your own business in your own neighborhood. And Europe, stay out of it. If you get involved, pulling the United States out of NATO.
Last thing before I let you go. So the UN Security Council just passed the quote unquote stabilization force to occupy ostensibly Gaza. Russia and China abstained. The other governments effectively allowed it to go through. And I guess my main question is, how do they plan to disarm Hamas?
I don't think it's going to have. Hamas will find workarounds, the United States. This just puts the United States in the crosshairs once again. It gets us more deeply involved in a crisis that we have no business being involved in, and we should be shutting everything off to the Israelis anyway. This is all, but greed enters into this because they have designs of refashioning all of Gaza for their own commercial purposes. Whether or not that ultimately results in a two-state solution is questionable. The Saudis, in the meantime, think that this is going to be that. They still harbor the notion of a two-state solution. In reality, they probably feel it's not possible either. but they're going to look out for their own interests ultimately. And if their
Yeah.
interests dictate normalizing things with the Israelis, they will, whether or not they ultimately get the two-state solution. They don't care about the Hamas, and do they care about the Palestinian people? Crown Prince Salman made it very clear that Palestinians didn't matter to him.
Yeah, but he cares about something because he still uses
His own greed, his own pockets, and his own interests, Saudi interests, and that's where his interests lie. They don't lie anywhere else.
Yeah. Do you think he cares about his life? Like, meaning,
Oh, sure.
is he of mind that if he goes through with like the Abraham Accords, for example, that he's under threat from people of his own citizens, considering that they're completely against his normalization of ties with Israel?
Well, there's probably some element of that, but whether or not he'll do it, I tend to think he's going to hold off. He still has held off. For example, he's also held off on actually accepting the invitation to join BRICS. He's watching the political currents of how the U.S. will react, and that's why he's proceeding very, very cautiously. Now he's going to get a bunch of F-35s. Trump said, "Yeah, I'm going to get if the Congress agrees." That requires congressional approval, but the point is that Trump has agreed to do that. So what does Trump want in return? Well, the Trump organization is now working on some commercial deal in Saudi Arabia. Isn't that intriguing? And,
yes, it is.
And Trump himself only has about 3 years left in his presidency. So everything, his golden parachute will have been set for him as he leaves office.
This is corruption on the level that is.
I mean, it's all real estate.
Yeah. Going back to the deal for a moment, or the quote unquote the stabilization force. Do you foresee these governments actually putting an occupation force in Gaza?
No.
I mean, for one, they're going to have to get the troops. You have to get the countries that are willing to do it. Hamas is obviously against it. This is colonialism on steroids. Effectively,
I agree with you fully. It's all talk. I mean, let's see if it comes to pass. Now, countries that have agreed to send in troops, will they? I don't know. Will the Egyptians? I don't know. If they want to avoid having the Israelis take over everything, maybe the Egyptians ought to move troops in there, and it's a very dicey thing. In fact, the Israelis and the Egyptians almost came to blows when the Israelis threatened to move the settlements into the Sinai. So they're on a hair trigger down there on that border. So anything, and then you have the whole Turkish element to consider, and you have Turkey and Israel now at odds. So this, especially over Syria. So that could really open up Pandora's box here, and that whole area, of course, is still subject to Turkic influence. So I think the Turks before long are going to be weighing in on that dispute, as well as into the Caucasus, Southern Caucasus, and Central Asia all over again. So there's it never gets resolved, and it just gets more and more complicated. And that's what we're seeing right now. It's going to be increasingly complicated here as we try to move on. And this so-called stabilization force, we never haven't heard any announcements on who would join that force. Nothing. Although Fox News carried a piece last night on looking at the command center of the stabilization force in the Gaza along the border. Well, big deal, beautiful target. You know.
Well, the U.S. is talking about putting
with U.S. presence, huh?
Right. I was just about to get to that. The U.S. is talking about putting a military base.
Yeah, it's insanity. Yeah. It's insanity. Get out of there. We got 35 bases surrounding Iran right now, and we need one more base. And we already have troops occupying Israel. We need another base. and we got $1 trillion budget. In the meantime, back home, there's talk about affordability. Come on, why are we spending what's going to amount to about $1 billion to open up a whole new base when prices are still high back here and people can barely afford things? Where's the trade-off?
That's what I was going to say. Answer the question for me. Like, why are they putting the base in Israel like that?
I think it's just to look out for their interests. They want to occupy. It's all, as you pointed out earlier, it's all a new form of colonialism.
Michael, you were an awesome guest, and I thank you for this.
Thank you.
I really do. Great breakdown, man. Michael Maloof. Michael Maloof is a former senior security policy analyst for the Office of Secretary of Defense, author, regular contributing analyst on RT and other media outlets. He has nearly 30 years of federal service experience in the U.S. Department of Defense. By the way, Michael, what is the name of your book?
It's called, wow.
I've read this thing so many times and I never actually did the name of the book.
It's called A Nation Forsaken. And it has to do with EMP, electromagnetic pulse.
Yep.
And Nation for, yes, it was on Amazon still. You can get it through Amazon. At least I used to. It was published like in 2013.
Okay. I'll check it out. I'll look it up.
All
Michael, thank you for this, man. You be safe. You have a good day, okay?
You too.
Bye-bye. All right. Michael Maloof, fantastic guest. We have come to the end. We have come to the end. Let's see. Let me go. Uh-oh. The audience is not liking it. Ferd won't do anything from America because we see how the government is. They have. Well, I mean, look, he's going to have his take. He's going to have his take. It's his take. On the tariffs. So, is what it is. But fantastic breakdown. Great explanation of what is taking place in the Middle East. Great explanation of what is taking place in regards to Russia and negotiations, or I could say lack thereof. So shout out to Michael. Always appreciate him joining me. Let's go to chat for a bit. Luca Jamal, you have the gall to call this morning show and yet to provide no makeup tips, fashion recommendations, or delicious recipes. Luca, I will send you delicious recipes. Like I said, I make a mean BLT. I make a mean honey barbecue chicken wings. I do damn good with those. I do rice well when I have a rice cooker. Best I got for you, man. Best I got for you. Let's see, what is this? Response to Carl Zhao: why does China and Russia care what Western media does or says? Nobody is asking China to fight for Palestine. We object to China, in particular, enabling the diabolical entity via trade. Yes. Well, as I pointed out to him, nobody's expecting China and the U.S. to go to war, or for that matter, Russia and the U.S. to go directly to war. The issue is more so, it's a veto. It's not, like, it's not firing a missile. It's a veto. I suspect he's right on two counts, though. One, as Michael pointed out, or as Dimitri pointed out, I think, they may not have an expectation that this stuff is going to be implemented. How, like, I keep asking this question, how do you disarm Hamas? So what, the Egyptians, the Turks, the Indonesians, they're going to send a military force in and do what? Wage war against Hamas in order to get them to disarm? Or what, they're going to use Israel as a cudgel and leverage to effectively, continuously bomb and murder Palestinians to get Hamas to disarm? It's effectively, they're trying to do in this kind of UN coup what they couldn't necessarily do through military means. I don't know. It could be, we think this is going to fail miserably, and because we think this is going to fail miserably, let it pass and let it fail, and we can poke attention to it as it fails. I don't know. That's not the way I'm looking at this. I'm looking at this from the perspective of, does the Palestinian population have the right to self-determination? Yes or no? And according to this colonial document, almost like a Balfour document, apparently they don't, according to the United Nations. Talk about an agency that's completely discredited itself. That's assuming that it had any legitimacy in the first place. Looks like a worldwide attack on the Cloudflare has happened. 90% of the internet services are using Cloudflare. A reminder how fragile everything is. So that's why Twitter was down. That's why Twitter was down. It's like you try to load it. I mean, I couldn't even load it in StreamYard. Like, it just wouldn't work. It just failed miserably from the beginning. Black Spot, shout out to you, Black Spot. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Jay Galt, let's see, 5 IQ guest. Tariffs are a small part of Kerry's America system after industrial policy and massive infrastructure investment. They were never reciprocal. We also didn't have a standing army or an empire. Michael Maloof is not here to have a conversation about tariffs, which is why I didn't focus on tariffs. Obviously, I disagree with him on that premise. Something that was taking place 100 years ago in regards to U.S. policy does not necessarily fit into a modern economy. It just doesn't. The United States deficit is what, $36 trillion, going on $37 trillion. Trump got like $100 billion in tariffs that we ultimately have to pay. So, no, I don't agree with that premise. So, which is why I didn't linger on tariffs. Also, let's be very clear. The fact that Donald Trump is backing off on tariffs makes it clear that the amount of money that we're spending has gone up as a direct result of those tariffs. Full stop. When Donald Trump is making the argument, well, people don't need 30 teddy bears or 30 doll babies. You can deal with 2. Why are you telling me that in the context of tariffs? So you are acknowledging that the amount that I'm going to have to pay for doll babies is going to go up, where I can't buy my 30 doll babies. Maybe I want 30 doll babies. In fact, don't take my word for it. Take one of Trump's representatives. Listen to this. This is clownish. And I don't know why he hires these cartoonish people to do it. And this is to back up your point on tariffs, by the way. Listen to this. Trump administration official. Trump lowers the amount of tariffs because he's getting all sorts of political pressure on the issue of the amount of money people are spending at the grocery store and whatnot. Listen to what he says.
But let me ask you the question I asked again. So the tariffs have been removed from these items that we all, many of us buy every, at the grocery store. How soon do we expect the prices on those goods now to go down?
Right. Well, the prices for those goods weren't necessarily going up just because of tariffs.
All right. Now, this is him staying on message, right? Well, I can't say that the price will go down, because if I said the price will go down, that indicates that tariffs were actually increasing the prices that Americans were paying at the grocery store. All right, let's keep going.
And so the prices will go down. Well, the prices will go down, of course, but
because the tariffs have been taken off.
Right. Well, and because the supply of the goods into the U.S. is going to increase.
Because the tariffs have been taken off. Now, whether you want to make the argument that the tariffs slow the amount of goods that are coming into the U.S., which increases the price, or whether you want to make the argument that tariffs, because they are a tax that Americans have to pay, that tax, that for all intents and purposes, the prices go up, doesn't matter. Both of those things are the same. People are paying more for goods and items that they essentially use in their daily living. Coffee, beef, fruits, bananas, etc., etc., etc. They're lying through their teeth if they're telling you the tariffs are not a tax. They are. And a tax, by the way, that the Supreme Court might actually get rid of. The Supreme, this is not even close, right? This is a responsibility and a power held by Congress, not the President of the United States. Now, Congress may come in and try to save Trump's ass on this and pass some kind of legislation in order to, come up with some kind of means of allowing this to go through. But there's like $200 billion that Americans have had to pay, that companies in the United States have had to pay. What happens to that money? What happens to that money? RTYR Warriors Revolutionary greetings, Mat Hotep Uhuru. What is that last word? Nguvu. Power fist. Power fist. Frank Frio. China and Russia can want America to act like a normal country. Yes, all they want. It never going to happen. America oligarchs want their shit, and they better realize that before America finds a way to corrupt them from within. Agreed. Agreed. Like, look, there are two things that I don't buy. If you and I are engaged in a chess game, I'm trying to win regardless of whatever I say in that chess game. It's my job to try to win. Nobody plays for a draw. You may get to the point where you may try to play for a draw depending on the position, but for all intents and purposes, you're trying to win it. It's not that I think the BRICS came to fruition with the idea of destroying America. It's not that. But America certainly looked at it in that way. And this idea of de-dollarization and everything else, from America's point of view, de-dollarization is the destruction of America in many respects. And so you are engaged in a conflict whereby, let's say, the rules of the game necessitate you behave accordingly. The belief that the U.S. is going to be a quote-unquote normal country when nothing in our culture, nothing in the way that we talk about ourselves, nothing in the way that we engage around the world gets that across. It's nonsense, right? And I would wager that China and Russia are cynical enough to know that that's nonsense. They may want that. They're never going to get that. Short of this country declining and falling apart to the point where, you don't have a choice. If you want the U.S. to be a quote-unquote normal country or to engage you as a peer, then you need to be strong enough to force it to engage you as a peer, which is the reason why China has effectively gone in the route that they've gone of, we're going to create equality among the pain that you're dispensing or trying to dispense. It's not about we're going to be nice. It's not about we're going to be lovable. It's not about we're going to be moral and kind. It's none of that stuff doesn't matter in international relations. You can look at the vote that took place in the UN Security Council over this whole idea of this paternalization, colonization of Palestine. You can look at the genocide that just took place. You can look at the wars around the world, the murdering of Caribbean fishermen. None of this stuff has to do with being nice or kind. All of it has to do about what is in a particular country's interests. No more, no less. That doesn't mean that countries would actually work in their interests, even though they may, that sounds weird. You go into a bar, getting wasted, hooking up with a rando chick, may seem like it's in your interest when you're trying to hook up with a rando chick, until you find out that chick had syphilis and you've just been caught. I'm saying we do things all the time that is not necessarily in our interest that we think is in our interest. In the words of Robert McNamara, rationality is not always rational. I think he's wrong on that, but let's go with it for a moment. We may do things that we think are in our interest from the standpoint of oligarchs in the country that may not necessarily be in the interest of the various people in the country as a whole. Whether that's, spending $1 trillion on military, whether that's ignoring the health of the nation itself in lieu of putting all of this money in the hands of oligarchs as opposed to the population itself, whether it's spending $10 trillion on wars in the Middle East, none of these things are to our benefit. And you can look at China as an example. What does it look like if we spend $10 trillion in the US as opposed to blowing it in Afghanistan and Iraq? Would this country look more like the high rises that are going up in China, the high-speed rail that is going up in China? Would our subways look better? Would you have less people who are addicted to drugs? Would you have more people who are fiscally solvent? I'm trying to make the point. Would you have a healthcare system that's actually functional, that people would use without spending thousands of dollars to get basic treatment? I'm saying you would have a different country. So no, I don't have any expectation that the U.S. acts like a quote-unquote normal country. The conversation with Dimitri is a fascinating one. The UN, look, I've made this argument before. There is no such thing as international law. How could there be, since there is no mechanism to enforce international law? So it's all consensual, unless you are a podunk dictator in some random country where they can effectively go and grab you from. The moment that you have nukes, the moment you have a military capability and an economic capability to defend yourself, they don't matter. None of it matters. Your laws are entirely consensual that I can blow off at any particular moment, meaning they're not laws at all. It's opinion. We prefer you do X or Y. But you can't do anything about it if I don't. So this idea of what does it look like to have an international body with the teeth to actually enforce rule sets? Well, no country is going to agree to that. Why would I agree to that? If I am the United States and I don't trust you because you may have mean girls that develop in your political coalition, then I'm going to tell you to F off. Why would I ever give up enough power where you would have some level of control over my sovereignty? Why would any public give that up? Now, if the world goes to shit in some kind of nuclear oblivion or some kind of disaster, maybe, but it would take something like that. That's not necessarily just going to happen on the fly. Who is this? This is Private Life. I wonder if the background thought process is that there's a peacekeeping troops from various nations present that Israel will stop bombing. I don't know. I guess I think I'm more cynical. I think they may look at it and think to themselves, Israel committing that genocide has been disastrous from the standpoint of credibility and image of the United States and Israel. They've been isolated from around the world. And whatever they're going to do now is doing the opposite of what they're claiming it's going to accomplish. So let it happen. Let the world see it fail. Let it see it fall apart. Let it see it go to pot. Is Israel going to bomb Turkish troops? I don't know. Is Israel going to continue to bomb in Gaza? And what does the peacekeeping, quote unquote, force, stabilization force, what do they do in that process if Israel bombs Gaza? I don't know. There's no provision for those Israeli troops to leave. There's that. Like, meaning this fake ceasefire has always been a fake ceasefire. And it's very possible that Russia thinks nothing is going to come of this in real terms. The ability for them to put this together, it's not going to be able to come to fruition. How do you disarm Hamas? I am that question. That question eludes me. I don't have an answer for that question. And what troops, what countries are going to put up their troops to invade and occupy Gaza, effectively doing the job that Israel couldn't do? I don't know. Provider life, I don't have a question. I don't have an answer for that. I legit don't have an answer for that. And I don't think my guests had an answer for that one either. But it is a good question. It is a damn good question. All right. We have come to the end. I want to thank all of you who donated. As I point out, you guys make the show what it is. I am trying to get a producer. All of these donations help in that. Subscriptions help. Likes help. All of it helps. This channel growing is the thing that will allow that to take place. But your donations definitely help keep this content going. I have no idea when they decide to, demonetize the channel or demonetize various videos. I only found out after the fact. So when I say that you guys allow the show to operate, I mean it in the most realist sense of the word. Thank you for it. Like the video, share the video. God, I have a lot of work to do tonight. I have to cut videos. If you guys dig the content, like it, share it. You can always support PayPal, Patreon, buy me a coffee, super chats, memberships, etc. Be safe. Be kind to the degree that you can be kind. And I'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Have a good one, all. Thanks.